When a billionaire CEO knocks on a janitor's door at midnight on New Year's Eve, she isn't looking for celebration. She's looking for the one person who might stop her from destroying hundreds of lives by morning. If you want to know how one honest conversation can change everything, stay with me until the end. And please, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The fireworks started at 11:45. Daniel Brooks stood at the window of his small Chicago apartment, watching streaks of gold and silver split the winter sky. The city stretched out before him, glittering and alive, filled with people counting down to midnight, surrounded by friends, family, champagne, and noise. He could hear their distant celebration through the glass, laughter, music, the occasional shout of joy. His own apartment was silent. Emma's stuffed rabbit sat on the couch where she'd left it that morning. Her coloring books were stacked neatly on the coffee table. A half-finished puzzle of a castle covered one corner of the dining table. The space felt too big without her, too quiet, too empty. She was with her grandmother tonight, probably already asleep, curled up in blankets that smelled like lavender and old books. Daniel had told himself it was fine. Emma deserved time with her grandmother. He deserved a quiet night to think, to breathe, to not worry about bedtime stories or checking for monsters under the bed. But now that midnight approached, the silence pressed against him like a weight. He checked his phone. No messages, no missed calls. Just the glowing numerals, 11:52 p.m., 8 minutes until the new year. He wondered if this was what the rest of his life would feel like, standing at windows, watching other people celebrate, holding on to quiet rooms and empty hours. He wasn't bitter. He'd made his choices. When Emma's mother left 3 years ago, Daniel had chosen his daughter over everything else, over promotions, over social life, over the career trajectory that might have taken him somewhere impressive. He worked maintenance now at Arcadia Technologies, one of the largest tech corporations in the Midwest. He mopped floors, fixed broken hinges, replaced light bulbs in conference rooms where decisions worth millions were made by people who never looked him in the eye. It wasn't glamorous, it didn't pay enough, but it was stable, and the hours let him pick Emma up from school every day at 3:15. That mattered more than anything. The fireworks intensified. A massive burst of red and white exploded over the lake, followed by cascading silver sparks that looked like falling stars. Daniel pressed his palm against the cold glass and closed his eyes. "Happy New Year," he whispered to no one. The knock came at exactly midnight. Daniel's eyes snapped open. For a moment he thought he'd imagined it, a sharp, deliberate sound cutting through the distant celebration. But then it came again. 3 firm knocks. He moved toward the door, his heart suddenly loud in his chest. Nobody visited him, not at midnight, not on New Year's Eve, not ever really, except his mother when she dropped Emma off. He checked the peephole. A woman stood in the hallway. Tall, elegant, wearing a long black coat that looked like it cost more than his monthly rent. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, and even through the distorted lens, Daniel could see the tension in her shoulders, the tightness around her mouth. He knew her. Everyone at Arcadia knew her. Victoria Lane, CEO, founder. The woman whose face appeared on magazine covers and business profiles. The woman who'd built a tech empire from nothing, who commanded boardrooms and investor meetings with the kind of presence that made grown men nervous. The woman who, according to company legend, once fired an entire executive team in a single afternoon for trying to lie to her about quarterly projections. And she was standing outside his door. Daniel's hand froze on the deadbolt. This had to be a mistake. Maybe she had the wrong apartment. Maybe she was looking for someone else in the building. Maybe... She knocked again. He opened the door. "Mr. Brooks." Her voice was steady, controlled, but there was something underneath it, something fragile. "I apologize for the intrusion. May I come in?" Daniel stared at her. Up close, she looked different than she did in the rare moments he'd seen her at company headquarters. Her makeup was minimal. There were shadows under her eyes. The perfectly controlled exterior she maintained in public seemed thinner here, like ice over deep water. "Ms. Lane," he managed. Yes, of course." He stepped aside, suddenly acutely aware of how small his apartment was, how worn the furniture looked. how the carpet near the door had a stain from where Emma had spilled juice last month. Victoria Lane stepped inside with the kind of deliberate grace that suggested she was always conscious of how much space she occupied. She glanced around the room, taking in the puzzle, the children's books, the modest furnishings, and something shifted in her expression. Not judgment, something softer. "You have a daughter," she said. "Yes. Emma. She's 7. She's with my mother tonight." Victoria nodded slowly. She didn't take off her coat. Instead, she stood in the center of his living room like someone who wasn't sure she had permission to stay. "I'm sure you're wondering why I'm here," she said. The thought crossed my mind. A ghost of a smile touched her lips, then disappeared. "I need to talk to someone. Someone who won't lie to me. Someone who doesn't have anything to gain by telling me what I want to hear." She paused, and for the first time, Daniel saw genuine uncertainty in her eyes. "I realize this is highly unusual. If you'd prefer I leave—" "No," Daniel said quickly. "No, it's fine, please. Sit down." Victoria hesitated, then moved to the couch. She sat on the edge, her posture rigid, her hands folded in her lap. Daniel took the chair across from her, his mind racing. This was surreal. His CEO, one of the most powerful women in American business, sitting in his living room at midnight on New Year's Eve, looking lost. "Can I get you anything?" he asked. "Coffee? Water?" "No, thank you." She met his eyes directly. "Mr. Brooks, how long have you worked at Arcadia?" 4 years, maintenance division." "And before that?" Daniel paused. Nobody at Arcadia knew about his past. He'd never advertised it, never brought it up. It wasn't relevant to fixing broken toilets or replacing fluorescent bulbs. "I worked in operations management," he said quietly. "Different company. I left when my daughter was born." Victoria's expression sharpened with interest. "Operations management, what level?" "Senior analyst. I was being considered for a director position before I resigned." "Why did you resign?" Daniel looked at Emma's rabbit on the couch beside Victoria. "Because the job required 70-hour weeks and constant travel. Because my wife, my ex-wife, made it clear she wasn't interested in being the primary parent. Because I looked at my 3-month-old daughter and realized that no promotion was worth missing her childhood." Silence settled between them. Outside, the fireworks continued their brilliant, distant celebration. "That must have been a difficult decision," Victoria said softly. "It was the easiest decision I ever made." She studied him for a long moment, and Daniel had the strange sense that she was seeing him, really seeing him, in a way that didn't happen often in his life anymore. Most people looked at his uniform and made assumptions. Most people didn't look at all. "Mr. Brooks, what I'm about to tell you is confidential," Victoria said. "Legally, ethically, and professionally confidential. If you'd rather not be burdened with that knowledge—" "I understand confidentiality," Daniel interrupted gently. "Whatever you need to say, it stays in this room." Victoria drew a slow breath. Her fingers tightened in her lap. "Tomorrow morning at 9, she said, "I have a board meeting. The primary agenda item is a restructuring proposal that would eliminate 643 positions across our North American operations. The cost savings are substantial. The efficiency gains are measurable. Every financial analyst we've consulted says it's the smart move. Every advisor I trust has recommended approval." Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. 643 people, he repeated. "Yes." "How many of those are maintenance and facilities staff?" Victoria's jaw tightened. 117. Daniel leaned back in his chair. 117 people. 117 families. 117 individuals who probably lived paycheck to paycheck, who probably had kids and mortgages and car payments and medical bills, people like him. "And you came here because everyone around me has a vested interest in this decision," Victoria said. And now there was heat in her voice, frustration, maybe even anger. "My CFO will get a bonus if the restructuring succeeds. My board members care about stock prices and quarterly earnings. My executive team is insulated from the consequences. They'll approve this, collect their compensation, and never meet a single person whose life is destroyed by it." She stood abruptly, pacing to the window where Daniel had stood watching fireworks just minutes before. "I built Arcadia to create opportunity. she continued, her voice tight. To build something meaningful. To prove that you could run a successful company without treating people as disposable resources. And now I'm sitting in meetings where we discuss human beings like they're line items in a budget, where we use phrases like redundancy elimination and workforce optimization because those words are easier than saying, we're going to end people's livelihoods to improve our profit margin. Daniel watched her reflection in the dark glass. She looked exhausted. More than that, she looked haunted. Why me? He asked. Why come to someone in maintenance instead of, I don't know, your head of HR, someone with actual authority? Victoria turned to face him. Because you have nothing to gain by lying to me. Because you're one of the people this decision would affect. Because you made a choice once that cost you professionally but saved you personally, and I need to understand how you did that. How you decided what mattered. She crossed back to the couch, but she didn't sit. Instead, she stood there, her control visibly fraying. I'm 42 years old, she said quietly. I've dedicated my entire adult life to building Arcadia. I work 16-hour days. I haven't had a meaningful relationship in 7 years. I can't remember the last time I had dinner with someone who wasn't trying to pitch me something or get something from me. And tomorrow morning, I'm going to walk into that boardroom and make a decision that will define what kind of leader I actually am. Not what kind I pretend to be in press releases. What kind I actually am. Daniel stood slowly. And you want my opinion? I want the truth. I want someone to tell me what this decision looks like from the perspective of the people it will actually affect, not the sanitized version my advisors present, the real version. Daniel moved to the window, standing beside her. The fireworks had stopped. The city glittered quietly now, settling into the new year. You want the truth? He said. Yes. The truth is that you already know what this decision will do. You didn't come here for information. You came here for permission, or maybe for someone to tell you it's okay to do what you know is wrong because it's financially sound. Victoria flinched, but she didn't look away. The truth, Daniel continued, is that 643 people will wake up tomorrow morning with jobs. By tomorrow afternoon, they'll be unemployed. Some of them will lose their homes, some will pull their kids out of college. Some will skip medical treatments they can't afford anymore. Some will drain their savings trying to stay afloat until they find new work. And some of them won't find new work, not for months, maybe not for years. He turned to face her fully. And the worst part? The absolute worst part is that most of them will blame themselves. They'll think they weren't good enough, weren't valuable enough, weren't worth keeping. They won't know it was just math, just numbers on a spreadsheet that some executive decided looked better in a different configuration. Victoria's composure cracked. Not completely, but enough that Daniel saw the raw pain underneath. I don't want to do this, she whispered. Then don't. It's not that simple. Isn't it? You don't understand the pressure, the board expectations, the shareholder demands, the market analysis that says we're overstaffed and underperforming. If I don't act decisively, they'll replace me with someone who will. Daniel shook his head slowly. That's fear talking. That's not leadership. And what would you know about leadership at this level? The question came out sharp, defensive. You chose to step down. You chose the smaller life. I'm trying to protect an entire company, thousands of jobs, a legacy that matters. By sacrificing 600 people to save the rest? By making the hard choice that keeps Arcadia viable. At what cost? Daniel's voice rose to match hers. What does viability mean if it requires you to treat people as expendable? If it turns you into exactly the kind of leader you started this company to avoid becoming? Victoria stared at him, breathing hard. The careful mask she wore so expertly had fallen away completely, leaving only a woman who looked frightened and furious and desperately uncertain. You think I don't know that? She said, her voice breaking. You think I don't lie awake at night wondering when I stopped seeing employees as people and started seeing them as resources to be managed? When I stopped caring about individual stories and started only caring about aggregate data? She turned away, her hands shaking. I used to know everyone's name, she continued quietly. When we were small, when it was just 50 of us in a cramped office, I knew everyone's birthday. I knew who had kids, who was saving for a house, who was supporting aging parents. And now we're 3,000 people, and I can't possibly know all of them. So I tell myself it's okay to make decisions without knowing them, that it's just part of scaling up, part of growing, part of being a real CEO. But it's not okay, Daniel said gently. No, it's not. Victoria pressed her palm against the window glass, the same gesture Daniel had made earlier. I'm so tired. I'm so tired of pretending that ruthless efficiency is the same thing as good leadership, that caring about people is a weakness instead of a strength, that the only thing that matters is the bottom line. Daniel moved closer, careful not to crowd her. Then stop pretending, he said. Victoria laughed, a broken, bitter sound. And do what? Walk into that board meeting and say I'm refusing to approve the restructuring because it hurts people's feelings? They'll remove me within a week. Maybe. Or maybe you walk in and say you're refusing to approve it because you found a better way. Because you believe in the people who built this company with you, and you're going to invest in making them more effective instead of just cutting them loose. Because you're willing to take the harder path that doesn't sacrifice human beings for quarterly earnings. That's naive. Maybe. But you didn't build Arcadia by taking the easy path, did you? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a lone firework bloomed red against the black sky. Someone's delayed celebration, brilliant and brief. I was 23 when I started this company, she said softly. I had an idea and $5,000 in credit card debt and absolutely no idea what I was doing. Everyone told me I'd fail, that the market was too competitive, that I was too young, too inexperienced, too female. And I built it anyway. I built it by working harder than anyone else, by refusing to compromise on quality, by treating people well because I remembered what it felt like to be dismissed and underestimated. She turned to look at Daniel, and her eyes were wet. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. I forgot why I started. I let the board convince me that caring was unprofessional, that sentiment was weakness, that the only thing that mattered was growth and profit and market share. And now I'm standing in a stranger's apartment at midnight on New Year's Eve because I'm terrified of who I've become. Daniel felt something shift in his chest, a recognition of shared pain, shared understanding. He thought about the choice he'd made 4 years ago, the career he'd walked away from, the certainty he'd felt when he looked at Emma and knew that nothing else mattered more than being present in her life. When Emma was born, he said quietly, my boss told me that taking extended paternity leave would derail my career, that men who prioritize family over work were never taken seriously, that if I wanted to make it to the executive level, I needed to prove my commitment by being available 24/7. What did you say? I said that if being a good father made me a bad employee, then I was okay being a bad employee. Daniel smiled slightly. I quit 3 months later, took a massive pay cut, moved to a smaller apartment, started over in a field where nobody cared about my credentials or my ambitions. Do you regret it? Not even once. He met her eyes. Because Emma knows I chose her. Because when she's grown, she'll remember that her father was there, that he showed up, that he prioritized her over everything else, even when it cost him. Victoria's face crumpled. She covered her mouth with her hand, but she couldn't stop the tears that spilled over. I don't have that, she whispered. I don't have anyone who knows I chose them. I don't have anyone I prioritized over the company. I have a corner office and a stock portfolio and business awards, and absolutely no one who actually cares whether I exist beyond what I can do for them. Daniel reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he rested his hand gently on her shoulder. Then maybe it's time to change that, he said. Victoria looked up at him, mascara-streaked, carefully constructed image completely destroyed. And for the first time since she'd arrived, she looked real, vulnerable, human. I don't know how, she admitted. Start by making the choice that lets you sleep at night. Start by being the leader you wanted to be when you founded Arcadia. Start by remembering that every number on that spreadsheet is a person with a life that matters just as much as yours does. She drew a shaky breath. The board will fight me. Probably. The shareholders will be furious. Likely. I might lose my position. Possibly. Daniel squeezed her shoulder gently. But you'll keep your integrity, and you'll keep your humanity. And years from now, when you look back at this moment, you'll know you chose people over profit. That's worth something, isn't it? Victoria closed her eyes. Fresh tears tracked down her face, but she was nodding. Yes, she whispered. Yes, it's worth something. They stood there together in silence, two people from completely different worlds who'd somehow found themselves in the same moment of truth. Outside, Chicago glittered with New Year possibility. Inside this small apartment, a decision was being made that would affect hundreds of lives. Tell me about Emma, Victoria said finally, her voice still rough with tears. Daniel smiled. She's in second grade. She wants to be a veterinarian, but last week she decided she also wants to be an astronaut, so we're figuring out if you can do both. She's obsessed with penguins right now. She makes me read the same penguin book every night before bed, and she corrects me if I skip any words. She sounds wonderful. She is. She's the best thing I ever did. Victoria pulled away gently, wiping her face with her hands. She looked exhausted, but somehow lighter, like she'd set down a weight she'd been carrying for too long. Thank you, she said, for being honest, for not telling me what you thought I wanted to hear. That's what you came here for, isn't it? Yes. Though I'll admit, when I drove over here, I wasn't sure what I was looking for. I just knew I couldn't face tomorrow without talking to someone real. Why me specifically? Daniel asked. You have 3,000 employees. How did you end up at my door? Victoria managed a small, tired smile. 3 months ago, I was in the building late, working on quarterly projections. I came out of my office around midnight, and you were there, mopping the executive floor. You were singing to yourself, something about Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Daniel felt heat rise in his face. Emma's favorite. Sometimes I practice so I can sing it better for her. I know. Because when you saw me, you apologized for the noise, and you explained about your daughter. And I thought, this is someone who cares about getting things right, who practices singing a children's song at midnight because he wants to do it well for his child. And then I thought, when was the last time I cared that much about anything beyond business metrics? She picked up her purse from where she'd set it down earlier. That night stuck with me, she continued. And when I was trying to decide who to talk to about this decision, who I could trust to give me truth instead of strategy, I remembered the man who practices lullabies while mopping floors because he wants his daughter to have the best version of everything, even small things. Daniel didn't know what to say. He'd been invisible for so long, just another maintenance worker in a uniform, that the idea of being seen, truly seen, by someone like Victoria Lane felt surreal. I'm glad you came, he said finally. I hope what I said helps. It does. Victoria moved toward the door, then hesitated. Can I ask you something? Of course. If the restructuring goes through, if I can't stop it, or if I lose my position trying, would you be okay? You and Emma? Daniel thought about his savings account, which held enough to cover maybe 2 months of expenses. He thought about the job market for former operations analysts who'd spent 4 years in maintenance. He thought about Emma's school, her health insurance, the stability she needed. We'd figure it out, he said. We always do. Victoria nodded slowly. That's what I thought you'd say. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. Not her standard corporate card, this one just had a phone number, handwritten. This is my personal cell. If anything happens, if you ever need anything, please don't hesitate. Daniel took the card, knowing he'd probably never use it, but understanding the gesture for what it was. An acknowledgement. A thank you. A bridge between two people who normally existed in completely separate spheres. Good luck tomorrow, he said. Thank you. Victoria opened the door, then paused. Daniel, can I call you Daniel? Of course. Daniel, your daughter is lucky. She doesn't know it yet, but she won the lottery when you became her father. The world needs more people who choose the way you chose. Before Daniel could respond, she was gone, her footsteps echoing down the hallway, leaving him standing in his doorway with a business card and the strange, disorienting feeling that something significant had just happened. He closed the door and walked back to the window. The city was quieter now. Most of the fireworks had stopped. In a few hours, the sun would rise on the new year, and Victoria Lane would walk into a boardroom where she'd make a choice that would define her legacy. Daniel didn't know what she'd decide. He hoped he'd given her something useful, some perspective that mattered. But ultimately, the decision was hers. The courage required was hers. The consequences would be hers. He picked up his phone and texted his mother. "Happy New Year. Give Emma a kiss for me. See you both tomorrow." The response came quickly. "Happy New Year, sweetheart. Emma's already asleep, but I'll tell her you sent love. She was asking if you saw the fireworks." Daniel smiled. "Tell her I saw them. Tell her they were beautiful." He set the phone down and looked around his small apartment. At Emma's puzzle, and her books, and her stuffed rabbit. At the life he'd built that looked nothing like the success he'd once imagined for himself. At the choice he'd made that had cost him everything except what actually mattered. And he thought about Victoria Lane, driving back to her own home, probably large and empty and filled with expensive things that brought no comfort, carrying the weight of 643 lives in her hands. He hoped she'd find her courage. He hoped she'd remember why she started. He hoped that somewhere in the conversation they'd just had, she'd found permission to be the leader she'd always wanted to be instead of the leader everyone expected her to be. Outside, the first light of dawn began to touch the edge of the sky. Daniel watched it come, this new year, this fresh start. Whatever happened in that boardroom, whatever Victoria decided, he knew one thing for certain. The truth still mattered. Integrity still mattered. Choosing people over profit still mattered. And sometimes, the most important conversations happen not in corporate offices or executive suites, but in small apartments at midnight, between two people brave enough to be honest. Daniel made himself coffee and settled onto the couch with Emma's rabbit, waiting for morning and whatever it would bring. The coffee had gone cold by the time Daniel's phone rang at 7:30 that morning. He'd been awake for hours, unable to shake the surreal quality of the previous night. He kept replaying the conversation, wondering if he'd said the right things, if he'd helped or just made everything more complicated for a woman already carrying impossible weight. The caller ID showed an unknown number. "Hello? Mr. Brooks, this is Jennifer Chen from Arcadia HR." The voice was crisp, professional, carefully neutral. "I'm calling to inform you that there's a mandatory all-staff meeting this morning at 10 o'clock in the main auditorium. Attendance is required." Daniel's stomach dropped. "What's it about?" "The meeting will cover important company updates. That's all the information I have. Please ensure you're there by 9:45. The line went dead. Daniel sat staring at his phone, his heart pounding. A mandatory all-staff meeting, important company updates, the kind of corporate language that meant nothing good. He thought about Victoria's face last night, the tears, the raw vulnerability. He thought about 643 people whose lives hung in the balance. He showered quickly, his hands shaking slightly as he buttoned his work shirt. The maintenance uniform felt heavier this morning, more conspicuous. He was supposed to pick Emma up from his mother's house at noon, but now he didn't know what his day would look like. Didn't know if he'd still have a job by noon. The drive to Arcadia's headquarters took 20 minutes through light holiday traffic. Most people were still recovering from New Year's celebrations, sleeping off hangovers, enjoying the rare day off. Daniel pulled into the employee parking lot and sat in his car for a moment, watching other workers arrive. He recognized faces. Marcus from facilities, Sarah from the mailroom, Diego who worked night security, people with families, people with bills, people whose whole worlds might be about to collapse. He checked his phone one more time. Nothing from Victoria. Not that he'd expected anything. Whatever was about to happen, she was already in that boardroom, already making the choice that would define everything. The main auditorium was filling up when Daniel arrived. The space normally held product launches and annual company celebrations, but today it felt different. Tense. Worried conversations echoed off the high ceilings, people clustered in small groups, speculation running wild. "I heard they're outsourcing IT to India," someone behind Daniel muttered. "No, it's manufacturing. They're closing the Chicago plant." "My manager said it's just a standard New Year address, nothing to worry about." Daniel found a seat near the back. From here, he could see the stage where a podium stood waiting, a massive screen behind it displaying the Arcadia logo. The company's motto blazed underneath, "Innovation through integrity." The irony wasn't lost on him. At exactly 10 o'clock, the lights dimmed. The side door opened and Victoria Lane walked onto the stage. She looked different than she had in his apartment just 10 hours ago. The vulnerability was gone, replaced by the polished exterior Daniel recognized from company press releases. Her hair was perfect. Her suit was impeccable. Her expression was controlled, unreadable. She moved to the podium with the kind of confidence that commanded attention, and the auditorium fell silent. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "Thank you all for being here on such short notice, especially on a holiday. I know many of you had plans, and I appreciate your flexibility." She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. Daniel wondered if she could see him back here, if she'd even remember their conversation now that she was back in her element. "This morning at 9 o'clock, Victoria continued, I met with Arcadia's board of directors to discuss our strategic direction for the coming year. The primary agenda item was a restructuring proposal that would have significantly reduced our workforce in the name of increased efficiency and improved profit margins." The auditorium seemed to hold its breath. Daniel felt the tension ratchet up around him. People leaned forward. Someone nearby grabbed their partner's hand. "The proposal was comprehensive," Victoria said. "It was backed by extensive financial analysis. Every metric suggested it was the smart business decision. Every advisor I consulted recommended approval." She gripped the podium. "I rejected it." A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. Daniel felt his own breath catch. "I rejected it," Victoria repeated, her voice stronger now. "Because I refuse to build success on the backs of people I'm supposed to protect. I refuse to treat human beings as disposable resources. And I refuse to lead a company that prioritizes quarterly earnings over the lives and dignity of the people who built it." The murmurs grew louder. Someone in the front row started clapping. Then someone else. Within seconds, the entire auditorium erupted in applause. People stood. The sound was thunderous, overwhelming. Daniel stood too, his vision blurring slightly as relief and admiration crashed over him. Victoria waited for the noise to fade, and Daniel saw something flash across her face. Not triumph, but something deeper. Gratitude, maybe. Or recognition that she'd just committed to a harder path than anyone in this room could fully understand. "I want to be clear about what this means," she said once the applause died down. "Rejecting the restructuring doesn't mean we ignore the challenges we face. We're not growing as fast as our competitors. Our operational costs are high. We have inefficiencies that need addressing. But we're going to solve those problems by investing in our people, not by abandoning them." She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her filled with bullet points. Daniel noticed she'd broken her own rule about presentation style, but right now people needed clarity more than elegance. "Here's what we're implementing instead," Victoria said. "First, a comprehensive training program to help every employee develop new skills and increase their value to the company. Second, a department-by-department efficiency review conducted with input from the people actually doing the work, because you know better than any consultant where improvements can be made. Third, a profit-sharing program that ensures everyone benefits when we succeed, not just executives and shareholders." More applause. Victoria raised her hand for quiet. "Fourth, I'm restructuring executive compensation. Starting immediately, senior leadership will take a 20% pay cut. That money will be redirected to employee development and retention programs. We'll lead by example, not by asking others to sacrifice while we remain comfortable." The applause this time was different, louder, more emotional. Daniel saw people crying, saw relief and disbelief and hope competing on faces all around him. "I won't pretend this will be easy," Victoria continued. "Some board members resigned this morning when I announced my decision. Some investors are already calling for my removal. The business press will probably crucify us for choosing people over profit margins. But I didn't build Arcadia to be just another corporation that treats employees as expendable. I built it to prove that success and integrity aren't mutually exclusive." She paused, and for just a moment her composure wavered. Daniel saw the woman from last night beneath the CEO facade, tired, scared, but determined. "Many years ago," Victoria said quietly, "someone told me that real leadership isn't about making the easy choice. It's about making the right choice, even when it costs you everything. Especially when it costs you everything. I forgot that for a while. I let fear and pressure convince me that caring about people was weakness. Last night, someone reminded me why I started this company, why I believed we could build something better, why integrity matters more than efficiency." She looked directly at the back of the auditorium, and Daniel knew, absolutely knew, she was looking at him. "So here's my promise to each of you," Victoria said. "I will fight for this company. I will fight for your jobs. I will fight for the idea that businesses can be both profitable and humane. And I will never again make a decision that treats you as numbers on a spreadsheet instead of people with lives that matter. The standing ovation this time lasted nearly 5 minutes. People were openly weeping. Daniel stood with them, his throat tight, watching Victoria Lane stand at that podium and own the choice she'd made. The choice that would define her career, her legacy, everything she'd built. When the meeting finally ended, the auditorium emptied slowly. People wanted to linger, to process, to believe that what they'd just heard was real. Daniel moved with the crowd toward the exits, pulled along by the current of bodies. "Daniel!" He turned. Jennifer Chen from HR stood beside him, the same woman who'd called this morning. "Ms. Lane would like to see you in her office," Jennifer said, "if you have a moment." Daniel's heart jumped. Now? If possible. He followed Jennifer through corridors he'd mopped 100 times but had never walked through during business hours. They took an elevator to the executive floor, past conference rooms and offices that practically radiated power and money. Jennifer left him at a heavy wooden door with a brass nameplate, Victoria Lane, Chief Executive Officer. He knocked. "Come in." The office was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline. Expensive art lined the walls. A massive desk dominated one end of the room, its surface pristine except for a single laptop and a framed photo Daniel couldn't see from this distance. Victoria stood by the windows, still in the suit she'd worn for the meeting. But her posture was different now, less rigid, more human. "Close the door," she said without turning around. Daniel did. The click seemed very loud in the quiet space. "Did I do the right thing?" Victoria asked. Her voice was small, uncertain in a way it hadn't been on stage. "Yes," Daniel said without hesitation. She turned to face him. Up close, he could see the strain around her eyes, the exhaustion she'd hidden during the meeting. 3 board members resigned. 6 major investors are threatening to pull their funding. My CFO told me I've committed professional suicide. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "He might be right." "He's not." "You sound very certain." "I am." Daniel moved closer. "What you did down there? That took more courage than any business decision I've ever seen. You chose people over profit. You chose integrity over ease. And yeah, it's going to be hard, but you gave hope to 3,000 people who were terrified they'd lose everything." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back quickly, but not before Daniel saw them. "I've been CEO for 12 years, she said. "I've made billion-dollar deals. I've negotiated with the toughest investors in the industry. I've stared down hostile takeover attempts, but I've never been as scared as I was walking into that boardroom this morning." "What changed between last night and this morning? What made you certain?" Victoria walked to her desk and picked up the framed photo Daniel had noticed earlier. She handed it to him. The image showed a young woman, maybe 25, standing in a cramped office surrounded by computer equipment. She was grinning at the camera with the kind of wild optimism that only comes from not knowing how hard things are about to get. "That's me," Victoria said, 20 years ago, first day in my first office. I just maxed out my credit cards to buy equipment. I had no employees, no investors, no business plan beyond build something meaningful. I was terrified and exhilarated and absolutely certain that I could change the world." Daniel studied the photo. The woman in it looked nothing like the controlled CEO he knew, yet somehow everything like the vulnerable person who'd stood in his apartment at midnight. "I keep that on my desk," Victoria continued, "to remind myself who I was before the suits and the board meetings and the pressure to perform. Before I learned to speak in corporate euphemisms and make decisions based on quarterly projections instead of human impact. That woman believed in something. She had integrity. She had vision. She had hope." "You still have those things," Daniel said gently. "Do I?" "Because this morning, staring at that restructuring proposal, I almost signed it. I had the pen in my hand. I was telling myself all the rational reasons why it made sense, why it was necessary, why I couldn't let sentiment override sound business judgment." "But you didn't sign it." "No, because I kept thinking about what you said, about Emma knowing you chose her, about having someone who knows they were prioritized. And I realized that if I signed that document, If I eliminated 643 jobs to improve our profit margin, then that woman in the photo would be ashamed of me. The person I was when I started this company would look at who I've become and be horrified. She took the photo back and set it carefully on her desk. So I walked into that boardroom, she continued, and I told them I was rejecting the proposal. And they argued. They showed me projections about what it would cost us in market share and investor confidence. They threatened me. They told me I was being emotional and irrational and that I'd destroy everything I'd built. And I told them that I'd rather destroy my career than destroy my integrity. How did they respond? Exactly as you'd expect. The ones who valued profit over principle resigned. The ones who believed in what we're trying to build stayed. And now I have to prove that my way can work, that we can be profitable and humane, that treating people well isn't just moral, it's smart business. Daniel set the photo down. You will. Not because it's easy, but because you're willing to do the hard work, because you remembered why you started. Victoria studied him for a long moment. I owe you an apology. For what? For showing up at your home unannounced, for burdening you with confidential information, for putting you in a position where you had to choose between honesty and telling your CEO what she wanted to hear. You don't owe me an apology for any of that. Then what do I owe you? Daniel smiled slightly. Nothing. You came to my door looking for truth. I gave it to you. That's the end of this transaction. Is it? Victoria moved to a small sitting area near the windows, 2 chairs and a low table that looked like they'd never been used. She gestured for Daniel to sit. Because I've been thinking, the training programs I mentioned in the meeting, the efficiency reviews conducted with employee input, I need someone to oversee those initiatives. Someone who understands both operational management and what it's like to work on the ground level. Someone who can bridge the gap between executive vision and employee reality. Daniel's breath caught. Miss Lane, Victoria, please. Victoria, I appreciate what you're suggesting, but I'm maintenance staff. I'm not qualified to, but you have a degree in operations management. You worked at the analyst level and were being considered for director. You chose to step back, not because you couldn't handle the work, but because you prioritized your daughter. That doesn't make you less qualified. It makes you exactly the kind of person I need. Daniel shook his head slowly. I've been out of that world for 4 years. I mop floors now. I fix toilets. I don't attend strategy meetings or develop training programs. But you could. You understand how decisions at the executive level affect people on the ground. You know what it's like to worry about making rent, to choose between your child's needs and your own, to wonder if your job will exist tomorrow. That perspective is more valuable than any MBA. The other executives will never accept it. A janitor suddenly promoted to, director level? They'll think it's favoritism. They'll think I slept my way into the position. Victoria's expression hardened. Then they can resign too. I'm done making decisions based on what will make people comfortable. I'm looking for competence, integrity, and the ability to see problems from multiple angles. You have all 3. Daniel stood and walked to the windows. Below, the city sprawled out in all its messy complexity. Somewhere down there, Emma was probably having breakfast with his mother, completely unaware that her father's life was being turned upside down for the 2nd time in 4 years. I can't work 16-hour days, he said quietly. I need to pick Emma up from school at 3:15. I need to be home for dinner. I need to be present in her life. Then we'll structure the position around that. Flexible hours. Remote work when possible. A salary that lets you afford good childcare for the times when you genuinely need to be here late. I meant what I said about investing in people, Daniel. That includes creating positions that allow parents to actually parent. And if the other executives push back, they won't. Not if they want to keep their jobs. Victoria's voice was steel now. I just fired 3 board members and restructured executive compensation. Anyone who has a problem with me promoting the most qualified candidate, regardless of their current position, is welcome to test me. Daniel turned to face her. She stood backlit by the window, and he could see both versions of her simultaneously, the vulnerable woman from last night and the fierce CEO from this morning, both real, both essential. Why are you really offering me this? He asked. Because you reminded me what leadership actually looks like. Because you made a choice once that cost you professionally but saved you personally. And I need people around me who understand that some things matter more than career advancement. Because you're the only person who's been completely honest with me in years, and I suspect you'll continue to be honest even when it's uncomfortable. She moved closer. And because, she added softly, I'm about to fight the hardest battle of my career. I'm going to try to prove that businesses can be both profitable and humane, that integrity isn't weakness, that treating people well is smart strategy, and I can't do that alone. I need people who believe in those things too, people who won't compromise when things get difficult, people who will tell me the truth even when it's easier to lie. Daniel thought about Emma, about the promise he'd made to himself 4 years ago to prioritize her above everything else, about the stability she needed and the example he wanted to set, about the difference between a job that paid the bills and work that actually mattered. I need to talk to my daughter, he said finally. Victoria nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need. The offer stands regardless of when you decide. And if I say no, then you say no. You keep your current position. Nothing changes. This isn't a threat or a manipulation. It's an offer from someone who respects what you bring to the table and believes you could help us build something better. Daniel moved toward the door, then stopped. Can I ask you something? Anything. Last night, when you were standing in my living room crying, was that real, or was that part of some strategy to get me to say what you needed to hear? Victoria's face softened. It was the realest I've been in years. Maybe ever. You saw me at my absolute lowest, Daniel, scared and exhausted and desperate for someone to tell me I didn't have to be the person everyone expected me to be. That vulnerability wasn't strategy. It was survival. Daniel believed her. He could see the truth in her eyes, the same raw honesty that had shone through last night when all her defenses were down. I'll give you an answer by tomorrow, he said. Thank you. He left her office and made his way back through the executive floor, past the conference rooms and the expensive art and the pristine carpets he used to vacuum at midnight. Everything looked different now, not because the physical space had changed, but because his relationship to it had shifted. He wasn't just the invisible maintenance worker anymore. He was someone Victoria Lane trusted, someone she wanted on her team. The question was whether he wanted to be on it. Daniel drove to his mother's house in a daze. She lived in a small bungalow in a quiet neighborhood, the same house where Daniel had grown up. Emma was in the backyard building a snowman when he arrived, her laughter carrying through the cold air. "Daddy!" She ran to him, snow-covered mittens leaving wet prints on his jacket. "Look, Grandma helped me make a snowman family. That's the daddy, that's the baby, and that's the pet penguin." Daniel scooped her up, breathing in the scent of her shampoo in the cold winter air. "A pet penguin, huh?" "Every family needs a pet penguin, Daddy. Everyone knows that." His mother appeared in the doorway, smiling. "She's been working on it all morning, very serious about getting the proportions right." Daniel set Emma down. "Can you finish the penguin while I talk to Grandma for a minute?" "Okay, but don't take too long. The penguin needs your help with his scarf." Inside, his mother poured coffee and studied Daniel's face with the practiced attention of someone who'd known him his entire life. "Something happened," she said. It wasn't a question. Daniel told her everything, the midnight visit, the conversation, the board meeting, Victoria's offer. His mother listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to concern to something that might have been pride. "So the question," Daniel finished, "is whether I can take this job without sacrificing what matters most, whether I can be present for Emma while also taking on the kind of responsibility Victoria's talking about." His mother set down her coffee cup. "Do you remember when you told me you were quitting your analyst job?" "Of course. I thought you were making a mistake. You were so talented, so driven. I couldn't understand why you'd throw away your career for diaper changes and bedtime stories." "You never said that." "Because I realized pretty quickly that you were making the bravest choice I'd ever seen. You were choosing your daughter over ego, over money, over the approval of people who'd never understand. And watching you these past 4 years, seeing the relationship you've built with Emma, seeing the kind of father you've become, I've never been more proud of anything in my life." She reached across the table and took his hand. "This job Victoria's offering," she continued, "it's not the same as your old position. It's not asking you to choose career over family. It's asking you to bring your whole self, including your experience as a father, to work that actually matters. work that could help other parents avoid the choice you had to make. But what if I can't balance it? What if I end up working late nights and missing school plays and becoming exactly the kind of absent father I promised myself I'd never be? Then you'll adjust. You'll set boundaries. You'll prioritize what matters and let the rest go. Just like you've been doing for 4 years. His mother squeezed his hand. Daniel, you're not the same person you were when you quit that analyst job. You're stronger now. More certain about what matters. More capable of saying no to things that don't serve your values. That person can take this job and do it well without losing himself. Through the window, Daniel could see Emma putting the finishing touches on her penguin snowman. She was singing to herself, completely absorbed in her task, completely confident that her daddy would come help when she needed him. What would I tell her? Daniel asked. How do I explain that daddy's job is changing, that things might be different? You tell her the truth, that someone asked for your help with something important, that you're going to try to make things better for a lot of families, that you'll still be there for her, still pick her up from school, still read penguin books every night before bed, and then you show her day after day that your promises are real. Daniel closed his eyes. He thought about Victoria standing at that podium, choosing the harder path. He thought about 643 people who still had jobs because one woman found her courage. He thought about the possibility of helping create a company where parents didn't have to choose between their children and their careers. He thought about the woman in that old photo, young and hopeful, and certain she could change the world. Maybe she still could. Maybe he could help. I'm going to say yes, he said quietly. His mother smiled. I thought you might. Am I crazy? Probably, but the best decisions usually look crazy until they turn out to be brilliant. Emma burst through the door, covered in snow and grinning. Daddy, the penguin needs you right now. He's falling apart. Daniel stood and let his daughter pull him outside into the cold. He helped her reinforce the penguin's middle section, adjust its stick wings, and wrap a scarf around what might have been its neck. Emma directed the entire operation with the seriousness of a surgeon, and Daniel followed her instructions exactly. When the penguin was finally stable, Emma stepped back to admire their work. Perfect, she declared. Now we have the best snowman family ever. Daniel looked at the lumpy figures standing in his mother's backyard. Imperfect, slightly lopsided, but built with care and love and complete commitment. Yeah, he said, putting his arm around his daughter. I think we do. That night, after Emma was asleep with her penguin book on the nightstand and her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin, Daniel sat at his kitchen table and composed an email to Victoria Lane. It was short, direct, honest. I accept your offer. I believe in what you're trying to build. I'll do everything I can to help make it work. But I need you to understand that Emma comes first, always. If that's acceptable, then I'm ready to start whenever you need me. Daniel. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. The response came less than 5 minutes later. Emma should come first, always. Anyone who tells you differently doesn't understand what leadership actually means. See you Monday at 9. We have work to do. Victoria Daniel closed his laptop and sat in the quiet of his small apartment. Outside, the city hummed with its usual nighttime energy. Inside, everything felt different, charged with possibility, weighted with responsibility, alive with the terrifying, exhilarating certainty that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't fully predict. He walked to Emma's room and stood in the doorway, watching her sleep. Her face was peaceful, completely trusting. She had no idea that her father had just accepted a position that would test everything he believed about himself. No idea that the stability she counted on was about to shift. But she knew, absolutely knew, that he loved her, that he chose her, that he would always, always put her first. And that knowledge, Daniel thought, would carry them through whatever came next. He pulled her door closed and walked back to the window where he'd stood on New Year's Eve, watching fireworks and feeling the weight of an empty apartment. 24 hours ago, he'd been invisible, a maintenance worker with a quiet life and no prospects beyond making it to next month's rent payment. Now he was about to help reshape a company, to fight for the idea that businesses could be both profitable and humane, to prove that caring about people wasn't weakness, but the strongest possible foundation for success. It was terrifying. It was impossible. It was exactly what he needed to do. Daniel Brooks, former operations analyst turned maintenance worker, turned whatever he was about to become, stood at his window and watched the city lights. Somewhere out there, Victoria Lane was probably still awake too, planning her next move, preparing for the battle ahead, trusting that the man she'd found crying over her daughter's stuffed rabbit would help her build something worth fighting for. He wouldn't let her down. He wouldn't let Emma down. And he wouldn't let himself down by choosing the easier path over the right one. Monday morning would come soon enough. Until then, Daniel had a daughter to make breakfast for, Penguin books to read, and a new chapter to prepare for. The hardest part was over. The real work was about to begin. Part 2. Lưu yêu chi. Viet 6000, 6500, two liên kết liên mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện và hội thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch, sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần, duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ, phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc. Kể theo ngôi thứ 3, giữ đồ kịch tính không viết lan man, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang document 15/57. Monday morning arrived with the kind of biting January cold that made Chicago feel like it existed at the edge of the world. Daniel stood outside Arcadia's headquarters at 8:45, watching employees stream through the glass doors, and tried to remember how to breathe like someone who belonged here. The maintenance uniform was gone. In its place, he wore a suit his mother had helped him pick out over the weekend. Nothing extravagant, but clean and professional enough that he wouldn't embarrass himself in executive meetings. Emma had insisted on helping him tie his tie that morning, her small fingers fumbling with the silk while she explained very seriously that daddies who worked in offices needed to look very fancy. "You look nervous," she'd said, studying his face with the brutal honesty only 7-year-olds possess. "I am nervous," he'd admitted. "That's okay. Mommy says being nervous means you care about doing good." Daniel had pulled her into a hug, wondering when his daughter had become so wise, and promised her he'd be there to pick her up from school at exactly 3:15, just like always. Now, standing in the cold, watching his former colleagues arrive for their shifts, he felt the full weight of what he'd agreed to. These people had known him as the quiet maintenance guy who mopped floors and fixed broken things. By the end of today, they'd know him as something else entirely, and he had no idea how they'd react. "Daniel!" He turned. Victoria stood beside him, appearing so suddenly he wondered if she'd been waiting. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent, her dark hair pulled back in the same severe style she'd worn at the all-staff meeting, but her eyes were softer than her appearance suggested. "Ready?" she asked. "No." "Good. If you were ready, I'd be worried you didn't understand what we're about to do." She gestured toward the entrance. "Come on, let's introduce you to the people who are going to spend the next 6 months questioning my judgment." The executive floor was exactly as Daniel remembered from his brief visit on Friday, polished, expensive, designed to intimidate. Victoria led him past curious stares and whispered conversations to a corner office with her nameplate beside the door and another newer plate below it that read, "Daniel Brooks, Director of Employee Development and Operational Integrity." "That's a mouthful," Daniel said. "I wanted something that captured both the training programs and the efficiency reviews. Plus, operational integrity sends a message about what we value." Victoria opened the door. "This is yours." The office was smaller than Victoria's, but still larger than Daniel's entire apartment. Windows overlooked the city. A desk that looked like actual wood, not particle board, dominated one wall. Bookshelves waited to be filled. A small conference table occupied one corner. "There's a private bathroom through that door," Victoria continued. "The IT team already set up your computer with all the necessary access. Jennifer from HR will bring your employee handbook and benefits information around 10. And at 11, you're meeting the rest of the executive team." Daniel's stomach clenched. "All of them?" "All of them. Fair warning, about half of them think I've lost my mind. The CFO, Robert Chen, is particularly skeptical. He's been with the company for 8 years and has very strong opinions about traditional corporate hierarchies." "Great. Nothing I love more than walking into a room full of people who already hate me." Victoria smiled slightly. They don't hate you. They hate change. They hate being challenged. They hate the idea that someone from maintenance might understand things they don't. But that's their problem, not yours. She moved to the window, and Daniel recognized the posture from New Year's Eve, that moment of vulnerability before she locked it away again. I'm asking a lot of you, Victoria said quietly. I know that. You're walking into a role with no real precedent, no established authority, and a team of executives who are going to test you at every opportunity. If you want to back out, I don't. You didn't let me finish. I don't need you to finish. I accepted this job because I believe in what you're trying to do, because I think integrity matters more than efficiency, because I want to help build something where parents like me don't have to choose between their kids and their careers. Daniel set his bag down on the pristine desk. So yeah, I'm terrified. Yeah, I'm probably going to make mistakes, but I'm not backing out. Victoria turned to face him fully, and for just a moment her controlled exterior cracked enough that he saw genuine relief. Thank you, she said. I know I didn't say it enough on Friday, but thank you for the conversation, for the honesty, for agreeing to this. Thank me after we actually accomplish something. Deal. She checked her watch. You have an hour before the executive meeting. I'd suggest using it to review the files I sent you over the weekend. Organizational charts, department budgets, the current training programs we're replacing. The more familiar you are with the details, the harder it'll be for Robert to trip you up. She left Daniel alone in his new office, and he spent the next hour doing exactly what she'd suggested. The files were comprehensive, almost overwhelming. Arcadia employed just over 3,000 people across 6 departments. The current training program consisted of occasional seminars that everyone complained about and nobody attended. The efficiency metrics were dense with corporate jargon that basically boiled down to, we're spending too much money and not making enough profit. At 10:55, Daniel closed his laptop and took a deep breath. He thought about Emma, probably sitting in her second-grade classroom right now, completely confident that her daddy would be there at 3:15. He thought about the 643 people who still had jobs because Victoria had found her courage. He thought about the maintenance workers who knew him, who'd eaten lunch with him, who'd complained about management without realizing he was about to become management. He stood, straightened his tie the way Emma had shown him, and walked toward the conference room where his new colleagues were waiting. The executive conference room was designed to intimidate. A massive table dominated the space, surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than Daniel's car. The walls were lined with awards and photos of Victoria shaking hands with politicians and tech industry leaders. Everything screamed power, success, exclusivity. 7 people sat around the table when Daniel entered. He recognized Victoria at the head, her expression neutral. The others turned to look at him with varying degrees of curiosity and skepticism. Everyone, Victoria said, this is Daniel Brooks, our new Director of Employee Development and Operational Integrity. Daniel, let me introduce you to the team. She went around the table. Robert Chen, CFO, mid-50s with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested he smelled something unpleasant. Margaret Okonkwo, Chief Technology Officer, younger than Daniel expected with sharp eyes that missed nothing. James Morrison, Head of Manufacturing, built like someone who'd actually worked on factory floors. Sandra Liu, Chief Marketing Officer, perfectly put together with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Kevin Patterson, General Counsel, studying Daniel like he was evidence in a trial. And finally, Rachel Martinez, Head of HR, who at least looked friendly. Daniel joins us from our maintenance division, Victoria continued, and Daniel saw several executives exchange glances. But before that, he worked in operations management at the senior analyst level. He understands both strategic planning and ground-level implementation, which makes him uniquely qualified for what we're trying to accomplish. With all due respect, Robert said, and his tone suggested no respect whatsoever. We're entrusting our entire workforce development strategy to someone whose most recent experience is mopping floors? The room went silent. Daniel felt every eye on him, waiting to see how he'd respond. He could play it safe, to defer to Victoria, try to smooth things over. Or he could do what Victoria had hired him to do, tell the truth. You're right, Daniel said calmly. For the past 4 years, I've mopped floors. I've cleaned bathrooms. I've fixed broken equipment and replaced light bulbs and done all the work that keeps this building functional, but that most executives never think about. And you know what I learned doing that work? Robert's eyebrows rose. Please, enlighten us. I learned that the people doing the work you consider beneath you are the ones who actually understand how this company operates. I learned that maintenance workers know which departments waste resources because we're the ones cleaning up after them. I learned that the divide between executives and employees isn't about intelligence or capability. It's about who gets listened to and who gets ignored. Daniel pulled out a chair and sat down, matching Robert's posture. You want to know my qualifications? He continued. I can read a budget. I can analyze operational efficiency. I can design training programs and conduct performance reviews. But more importantly, I can walk into the break room and have honest conversations with the people this company depends on. I can identify problems before they show up in your quarterly reports. I can build trust with employees who've been treated like replaceable parts for so long that they've stopped believing management cares about them. He leaned forward slightly. So yeah, I mopped floors. And that makes me more qualified for this position than someone who's only ever seen employees as data points on a spreadsheet. The silence that followed was different than before. Robert's face had gone slightly red. Margaret was trying not to smile. James was nodding slowly, like Daniel had just confirmed something he'd been thinking. Victoria's expression remained neutral, but Daniel caught the slight approval in her eyes. Well, Sandra said finally, at least we know he's not afraid to speak his mind. That's exactly why he's here, Victoria said. We've spent too long surrounding ourselves with people who tell us what we want to hear. Daniel's job is to tell us what we need to hear, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. And if what he tells us contradicts established business practices? Kevin asked. If his recommendations cost us money or competitive advantage? Then we'll debate it like adults, Victoria said. But we'll start from the position that employee well-being and business success aren't mutually exclusive. That's non-negotiable. Robert made a sound that might have been agreement or might have been disgust. So what exactly is your plan, Mr. Brooks? How do you intend to revolutionize our workforce development with your unique perspective? Daniel had prepared for this. He'd spent Sunday night outlining his initial strategy, checking it against Emma's nap time and bedtime routines, making sure everything was realistic given his 3:15 pickup constraint. First, he said, I'm going to spend 2 weeks doing nothing but listening. I'm going to talk to employees in every department, not in formal interviews, but in break rooms and parking lots and anywhere people feel safe being honest. I'm going to identify the real problems, not the ones management thinks exist. We already know the problems, Robert interrupted. We have performance reviews and efficiency metrics. You have data that tells you what's happening. I'm going to find out why it's happening. Daniel didn't let the interruption derail him. Second, I'm going to work with Rachel's HR team to design training programs that actually address employee needs instead of corporate requirements. Programs that help people develop skills they want, not just skills that benefit their current position. Rachel leaned forward. I like that approach. We've had terrible attendance at our current training sessions because employees see them as box-checking exercises. Exactly. And third, I'm going to implement the efficiency reviews Victoria mentioned at the all-staff meeting, but we're going to do them collaboratively, employees and management working together to identify improvements instead of consultants coming in with preconceived solutions. That sounds idealistic and time-consuming, Robert said. It is, but it's also the difference between changes that stick and changes that create resentment and decreased productivity. Margaret spoke for the first time, her voice thoughtful. How are you going to measure success? What metrics prove this approach works? Daniel smiled. This was the question he'd been hoping for. We'll track the usual metrics, productivity, efficiency, cost savings, but we'll also track things traditional business doesn't measure. Employee retention rates, internal promotion rates, the number of employees who recommend Arcadia as a place to work, sick day usage as a proxy for workplace stress, parent-employee satisfaction scores. Those last ones aren't standard business metrics, Kevin pointed out. They should be, because companies that treat employees well retain talent, reduce turnover costs, build institutional knowledge, and create cultures where people actually want to contribute instead of just collecting paychecks. James cleared his throat. I'll be honest, Brooks, When Victoria told us she was promoting someone from maintenance, I thought it was a publicity stunt. But you've clearly thought this through. I've had 4 years of thinking about it, Daniel said. 4 years of watching decisions get made that affected me and my colleagues without anyone asking what we actually needed. 4 years of seeing the gap between executive intentions and employee reality. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I'm saying I'm willing to ask better questions. The meeting continued for another hour. Robert challenged almost everything Daniel said, but his objections became less hostile and more genuinely curious as the conversation progressed. Margaret asked detailed questions about implementation timelines. Sandra wanted to know how this would affect Arcadia's public image. Kevin worried about legal implications. Through it all, Victoria remained mostly quiet, letting Daniel defend his own ideas, establish his own authority. Only at the end did she speak up. I want to be clear about something, she said. Daniel has my full support in this role. His recommendations will be taken seriously. His requests for resources will be approved unless there's a genuine, specific reason they can't be. And anyone who undermines him, subtly or overtly, will be having a very uncomfortable conversation with me. She looked directly at Robert when she said it. This company is changing, Victoria continued. We're choosing a harder path than the one our competitors are taking. Some of you will embrace that change. Some of you will resist it, but make no mistake, the change is happening regardless. The only question is whether you'll be part of building something better or whether you'll be obstacles we have to work around. The meeting ended shortly after. As people filed out, Rachel approached Daniel. Welcome to the team, she said warmly. If you need anything from HR, access to employee records, help setting up interviews, whatever, just let me know. Thank you, I appreciate that. And between you and me? Rachel lowered her voice. We've needed someone like you for a long time, someone who actually gives a damn about employees as people. Don't let Robert get to you. He's brilliant with numbers, but terrible with humans. James stopped by next. You handled yourself well in there. Not everyone could stand up to Robert on their first day. I get the sense he enjoys testing people. He does, but I also think he's scared. What Victoria's doing, what you're helping her do, it challenges everything he believes about how businesses should operate. Give him time. He might surprise you. Margaret was the last to approach, and her expression was harder to read. I'm curious about something, she said. Why did you really take this job? You had a stable position. You knew how to do it. You could have coasted for years. Why risk that for something this uncertain? Daniel thought about the best way to answer. He could give her the strategic reasoning, the career justification. But Margaret's question felt genuine, so he gave her a genuine answer. Because I have a 7-year-old daughter who's watching me, learning from me, building her understanding of what work should look like based on what she sees me do. And I don't want her to grow up thinking that work is something you endure for a paycheck. I want her to see that work can matter, that you can make choices that align with your values even when they're scary. That integrity isn't just something you talk about. It's something you live. Margaret studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled. Yeah, she said, I think you're going to be okay here. When the conference room finally emptied, Daniel found Victoria still sitting at the head of the table, reviewing notes on her laptop. You did well, she said without looking up. Robert hates me. Robert hates change. There's a difference. Now she did look up. But you stood your ground. You defended your ideas without being defensive. You showed them you're here to work, not to be coddled. I'm exhausted and it's only noon. Victoria laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her face. Welcome to executive leadership. It doesn't get easier. You just get better at being exhausted. Daniel checked his phone. No messages from his mother, which meant Emma's day was going smoothly. 3.5 hours until pickup. He could do this. What's next? He asked. Next, you start the listening tour you mentioned. I've already emailed department heads to let them know you'll be making rounds. Start wherever feels right. Victoria closed her laptop. And Daniel, the maintenance crew is going to be the hardest conversation. They're going to feel betrayed, like you abandoned them. I know. How are you going to handle it? By telling them the truth, that I didn't abandon them. I'm trying to help them. That someone has to bridge the gap between executive decisions and employee reality, and it might as well be someone who actually understands both sides. They might not believe you at first. Then I'll keep showing up until they do. Victoria nodded slowly. You really do understand what this job requires, don't you? I understand that nothing worth doing is easy. You taught me that on New Year's Eve. I think we taught each other. Daniel left Victoria's office and headed toward the maintenance department's break room. His hands were shaking slightly, and his heart pounded harder with each step. These were his people, or they had been until this morning. Marcus, who taught him the fastest way to strip and wax floors. Sarah, who always saved him half her sandwich when she packed extra. Diego, who'd covered his shift when Emma had strep throat and Daniel needed to take her to urgent care. They were in the break room when Daniel arrived, exactly as he'd expected. The lunch shift, eating quickly before heading back to their assigned zones. The conversation stopped the moment he appeared in the doorway. Marcus spoke first. Well, look who it is, our former colleague. The words stung, but Daniel had expected them. He moved into the room slowly, not sitting, not presuming welcome. I know how this looks, he said. I know it seems like I jumped ship, like I took the first opportunity to escape and left you all behind. That's exactly what it looks like, Sarah said. Her usual warmth was gone, replaced by cold anger. 4 years you worked with us. 4 years you complained about management right alongside us. And the second Victoria Lane offers you a promotion, you forget where you came from. I didn't forget. That's exactly why I took the job. Right. Because ascending to the executive floor is all about helping the little people. Diego's voice dripped sarcasm. You'll have to forgive us if we're skeptical. Daniel pulled out a chair and sat down anyway, making himself vulnerable. Let me tell you what I'm actually trying to do, he said. Victoria is attempting something that's probably going to fail. She's trying to prove that you can run a profitable company while treating employees like human beings instead of resources. She's trying to build programs that help people develop skills and advance their careers instead of just extracting maximum productivity. And she's doing it against a board that already lost 3 members over this, against investors who think she's lost her mind, against every traditional business practice that says people are disposable. He looked at each of them in turn. She asked me to help because I've been on both sides, because I know what it's like to analyze budgets, and because I know what it's like to worry about making rent. Because I can walk into executive meetings and into this break room and understand both perspectives. Because somebody has to be the bridge, and it might as well be someone who actually gives a damn about the people on both sides. Pretty speech, Marcus said. But what does it actually mean for us? What changes? Honestly, I don't know yet. That's why I'm here. I'm spending the next 2 weeks listening, really listening to what employees actually need instead of what management thinks they need. I want to know what makes your jobs harder than they should be, what resources you're missing, what policies make no sense, what training would actually help you instead of just checking corporate boxes. Sarah crossed her arms. And you expect us to believe you'll actually do something with that information? That it won't just disappear into the corporate void like every other employee feedback initiative? I expect you to hold me accountable. If I say I'm going to fix something and I don't, call me out. If I make promises and break them, tell everyone. I'm not asking for blind trust. I'm asking for a chance to prove that someone in leadership actually cares what you think. The silence that followed felt heavy, uncertain. These were people who'd been disappointed by management too many times to easily believe things could change. What about Emma? Sarah asked finally, and her voice had softened slightly. How are you going to do this job and still be there for her? I pick her up at 3:15 every day, non-negotiable. That was part of my conditions for taking this position. Victoria agreed to structure the job around my parenting responsibilities instead of asking me to structure my parenting around the job. And when there's a crisis that needs you to stay late, then there's a crisis that needs to wait until tomorrow, or that needs someone else to handle it, or that wasn't actually a crisis in the first place. Diego leaned back in his chair, studying Daniel with less hostility than before. You really think you can change things? One person against an entire corporate culture? No. I think we can change things. Employees and management working together instead of against each other. But it requires both sides being willing to try. Marcus stood and walked to the window, his back to the room. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than before. My daughter wants to go to college, he said. She's got the grades, got the drive. but I can't afford tuition on what I make here. I've been saving, but it's not enough, not even close. And every time management talks about investing in employees, what they mean is investing in people who already have degrees and career tracks. People like you used to be. Never people like us. He turned around, and Daniel saw the exhaustion in his face, the weight of working a job that didn't pay enough while trying to give his kid opportunities he never had. So, if you're serious about this, Marcus continued, if you actually want to know what would help, start there. Give us pathways to better positions. Give us training that leads somewhere instead of just making us better at the same low-paying jobs. Give us hope that we're not stuck here forever. Daniel pulled out his phone and opened a notes app. Tell me more. What kind of training? What positions? What barriers exist now? Marcus blinked, clearly surprised Daniel was actually taking notes. I'm serious about this, Daniel said. If you're willing to tell me what needs to change, I'm willing to fight for it. No guarantees it'll work. No promises I can fix everything, but I swear to you, I'll try. Sarah and Diego exchanged glances. Then Sarah started talking about the scheduling system that made it nearly impossible for parents to attend their kids' school events. Diego mentioned the equipment that constantly broke down because maintenance was always the last department to get budget approval for upgrades. Marcus detailed the education assistance program that technically existed but had so many restrictions that almost nobody qualified. Daniel wrote it all down. Every complaint, every suggestion, every piece of institutional knowledge that employees had gathered but management had never bothered to ask about. 2 hours later, when he finally left the break room, his notes filled 6 pages. His former colleagues hadn't exactly forgiven him, but they'd at least agreed to see what he could accomplish. It was a start. The afternoon passed in a blur of conversations. He talked to IT technicians about software that didn't work properly. He talked to customer service representatives about policies that made it impossible to actually help customers. He talked to manufacturing workers about safety equipment that needed upgrading. Everywhere he went, people were suspicious at first, then gradually opened up when they realized he was actually listening. At 3 o'clock, Daniel saved his notes, closed his laptop, and headed for the door. Several colleagues were still in meetings, still working, still grinding through their afternoons. Leaving already? Robert asked as Daniel passed his office. Picking up my daughter. I'll be back online tonight after she's in bed if anything urgent comes up. Robert's expression suggested this confirmed his worst suspicions about Daniel's commitment, but Daniel didn't care. He'd made a promise to Emma, and that promise mattered more than Robert's approval. Emma was waiting in her classroom when Daniel arrived at exactly 3:15. Her face lit up when she saw him, and she ran over with a drawing in her hand. Daddy, look what I made! It's you in your fancy office! The drawing showed a stick figure sitting at a desk with what might have been a computer or might have been a rectangular blob. Hearts surrounded the figure. It's perfect, Daniel said, sweeping her into a hug. Best office portrait ever. Did you have a good day at your new job? I did. It was hard and scary and exciting all at once. Like when I started second grade? Exactly like that. Emma held his hand as they walked to the car, chattering about her day, the science experiment they'd done, the book her teacher had read, the boy who'd gotten in trouble for putting glue in someone's hair. Normal, perfect 7-year-old concerns that grounded Daniel in what actually mattered. That evening, after dinner and homework and the Penguin book, and tucking Emma into bed, Daniel opened his laptop at the kitchen table. He organized his notes from the day, identified patterns, started drafting preliminary recommendations. The work was energizing in a way he hadn't felt in years, not because it was easy, but because it mattered. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. How was day 1? Daniel typed back. Exhausting, terrifying, exactly what I needed. Thank you for taking a chance on me. Her response came quickly. Thank you for taking a chance on this. We're going to build something that matters, Daniel. I can feel it. Daniel looked around his small apartment, at Emma's toys and drawings, at the life he'd built that prioritized her above everything else, at the new opportunity that had emerged from that choice. He thought about Victoria in her corner office, fighting to prove that integrity wasn't weakness. He thought about Marcus and Sarah and Diego and all the other employees who'd been ignored for so long they'd stopped believing anyone cared. This was going to be hard, harder than anything he'd done before. The resistance would be real. The failures would be inevitable. The path forward was unclear. But for the first time in 4 years, Daniel felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do, building something that mattered, one honest conversation at a time. The resistance came faster than Daniel expected. 3 weeks into his new position, he arrived at his office to find an email from Robert Chen marked urgent. The subject line read, "Budget concerns, re-proposed training programs." Daniel opened it with his coffee still steaming, already knowing this wasn't going to be a pleasant way to start the day. The email was cold, clinical, and devastatingly thorough. Robert had taken Daniel's preliminary training proposals and run them through financial analysis that made every initiative look irresponsible. The cost projections were inflated beyond anything Daniel had estimated. The ROI calculations assumed zero improvement in employee performance. The risk assessment painted each program as a potential disaster that would drain company resources while producing no measurable benefit. At the bottom, Robert had copied Victoria and the entire executive team. Daniel read it twice, feeling his frustration build with each paragraph. This wasn't genuine financial concern. This was sabotage dressed up as fiscal responsibility. Robert was trying to kill the programs before they even started by making Daniel look incompetent in front of everyone who mattered. He was drafting a response when his office door opened. Victoria stood there, holding her own printed copy of Robert's email. "Don't respond yet," she said, closing the door behind her. "He's distorting everything. These numbers are deliberately misleading. I know. That's exactly why you shouldn't respond while you're angry." Victoria sat in the chair across from his desk, her expression unreadable. Robert is doing what he always does when he feels threatened. He's trying to control the narrative through financial intimidation. If you respond defensively, you play into his hands. So what do I do? Let him torpedo everything we're trying to build? No. You build a better case. You take his inflated projections and show exactly where he's wrong. You demonstrate why investing in employees isn't just moral but profitable. You make him defend his numbers instead of making you defend yours. Daniel leaned back in his chair, forcing himself to breathe slowly. Emma had been asking him every night about his new job, wanting to know if he was helping people yet. He told her he was working on it, that big changes took time. Now he understood just how much time, just how much resistance, just how much fighting would be required. "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted. "I thought having good ideas would be enough. I thought if we could just show people a better way." Ideas are never enough. Not in business, not in life. Victoria's voice was gentle but firm. Change requires ideas and persistence and political skill and the willingness to fight the same battles over and over until the other side finally gives up or comes around. Robert isn't going to make this easy. Neither are the investors who've been calling me daily to complain about our approach. Neither are the board members who stayed but made it clear they're watching for any sign of failure. Then why are we doing this? If it's this hard, if everyone's against us? Because the alternative is becoming people we don't want to be, running a company we don't believe in, making choices we'll regret for the rest of our lives. Victoria stood and moved to his window, the same gesture she made when she needed to think. "I told you this would be hard. I didn't promise it would work, but I did promise to fight for it. And I meant that." She turned to face him. "So here's what happens next. You take Robert's email apart piece by piece. You show your work. You demonstrate why he's wrong and you're right. And then you present it at Friday's executive meeting where he can't hide behind email and has to defend his analysis in person. Friday. That's 2 days away. Then you'd better get started." Victoria left. And Daniel spent the next 48 hours building the most comprehensive business case he'd ever constructed. He worked during Emma's school hours, then again after she went to bed, sometimes until 2 in the morning. He cross-referenced Robert's cost projections with actual vendor quotes. He found case studies from other companies that had implemented similar programs and tracked their results. He built spreadsheets showing how reduced turnover would offset training costs, how increased employee satisfaction would improve productivity, how investing in people created institutional knowledge that saved money over time. His mother came over Wednesday evening to make dinner for Emma and put her to bed so Daniel could work uninterrupted. She found him at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, his eyes bloodshot from staring at screens. "You look terrible," she said bluntly. "Thanks, Mom. Really helpful." I'm serious, Daniel. When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours? I don't know. Monday, maybe. He rubbed his face. I have to get this right. If I can't prove Robert wrong, if I can't show that these programs will work, then you'll try something else. But killing yourself isn't going to help anyone, least of all Emma. His mother sat down across from him. She asked me tonight if you were mad at her. Daniel's head snapped up. What? Why would she think that? Because you've been distracted. Because even when you're with her, part of you is still working. Because she can feel you pulling away even though you're physically present. The guilt hit like a punch to the chest. This was exactly what Daniel had been afraid of. Exactly what he'd promised himself wouldn't happen. He was supposed to be different. He was supposed to prioritize Emma. Instead, he was turning into every absent parent he'd ever criticized. I'm trying to build something that matters, he said quietly. I'm trying to create a company where other parents don't have to choose between their kids and their careers. I know, and that's beautiful. But Emma is 7 years old. She doesn't understand noble causes. She just knows her daddy is tired and stressed and not really there anymore. Daniel closed his laptop and pressed his palms against his eyes. His mother was right. He'd been so focused on winning this fight with Robert, on proving himself, on making the training programs work, that he'd let the most important thing slip. What do I do? He asked. You remember why you took this job in the first place. Not to work 80-hour weeks, not to prove yourself to executives who might never respect you, to create space for people to be good parents and good employees simultaneously, which means you have to model that yourself. She stood and squeezed his shoulder. Finish what you absolutely must finish tonight, then get some sleep. Tomorrow, take Emma to school yourself instead of having me do it. Be present with her. Show her she still comes first. The work will still be here, but your daughter's childhood won't. After his mother left, Daniel looked at the mountain of work still remaining. He could push through, stay up all night, make absolutely certain every detail was perfect. Or he could trust that what he had already prepared was enough, that being a good father mattered more than being a perfect executive. He saved his files, closed his laptop, and went to bed. The next morning, Daniel woke Emma up gently and made her favorite breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes shaped like penguins. She was suspicious at first, studying him carefully. Are you sick, Daddy? No, sweetheart. Why? Because you're making penguin pancakes on a Thursday. You only make penguin pancakes on special days. Daniel sat down beside her. What if I told you that every day with you is a special day? What if I said I'm sorry for being so distracted lately, and I want to make it up to you? Emma considered this seriously, her fork hovering over her pancakes. Are you going to stop being tired all the time? I'm going to try. I'm going to remember that you're more important than any work meeting or any report or anything else. Even more important than helping all those people at your job? Especially more important than that. Because you know what I figured out? If I can't be a good daddy to you, then I have no business telling other people how to balance work and family. Emma smiled, her real smile, not the careful one she'd been giving him lately. Okay, but the penguin's flipper is crooked. I'll fix it. Can't have a penguin with a crooked flipper. He drove her to school himself, walked her to her classroom, and hugged her goodbye properly, instead of the distracted half-hugs he'd been offering. Her teacher, Mrs. Anderson, caught his eye and mouthed, "Thank you," in a way that told Daniel she'd noticed his absence too. Friday's executive meeting started at 9. Daniel arrived 15 minutes early with 3 copies of his analysis, one for himself, one for Victoria, and one for Robert. The other executives would see it on screen, but these 3 needed paper copies they could mark up and reference. Robert was already there, sitting in his usual seat with that expression of faint superiority he wore like armor. He raised his eyebrows when Daniel handed him the bound report. Doing some light reading? Robert asked. Responding to your concerns, thoroughly. The others filtered in gradually. Margaret with her ever-present tablet, James looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, Sandra perfectly composed, Kevin taking notes before the meeting even started, Rachel offering Daniel an encouraging smile. Victoria entered last and closed the door. All right, she said without preamble. Robert raised significant financial concerns about Daniel's proposed training programs. Daniel has prepared a response. I'm giving him the floor to present it, and then we'll discuss. She looked at Daniel and nodded. He stood, connected his laptop to the projection system, and pulled up his first slide. His hands were steady. His voice was clear. Everything his mother had said about being present for Emma applied here too. He couldn't be halfway in this fight. He had to commit completely or not at all. Robert's analysis identified several cost concerns, Daniel began. Let's address them systematically. First, the claim that training programs will cost $800,000 in the first year. That number assumes we're hiring external consultants at premium rates. We're not. We're developing programs in-house using existing staff expertise, which reduces costs by approximately 60% up. He clicked to the next slide, showing his revised budget breakdown. Second, Robert's ROI calculations assume zero improvement in employee performance post-training, but data from companies with similar programs shows average productivity increases of 15 to 20% within 6 months. Even if we only achieve half that, and I believe we'll do better, the increased output more than justifies the investment. Robert leaned forward. Those companies aren't comparable to our situation. Different industries, different workforce compositions. Which is why I also analyze data from tech companies specifically. Same industry, similar workforce, comparable market positions. The results hold. Daniel clicked again. Third, your risk assessment treats employee development as pure cost with no strategic value. But turnover costs us an average of $42,000 per employee when you factor in recruitment, onboarding, and lost productivity. If these programs reduce turnover by just 10%, again, conservative estimate, we save over $1 million annually. He let that number hang in the air. But here's what your analysis completely missed, Daniel continued, and now there was heat in his voice. You treated employees as interchangeable units. You assumed that investing in people has no effect on innovation, customer satisfaction, or company culture. You ran numbers like we're talking about equipment instead of human beings whose engagement directly impacts every metric we care about. Margaret spoke up. Do you have data supporting the connection between employee development and those outcomes? I do. Daniel pulled up a new slide dense with citations. Companies that invest heavily in employee development show 25% higher customer satisfaction scores, 30% more internal innovation, and significantly stronger brand reputation. Employees who feel valued become advocates. They go above and beyond. They solve problems before they become crises. You can't quantify that in a traditional ROI calculation, but it absolutely affects our bottom line. James was nodding. Sandra looked intrigued. Kevin was taking rapid notes. Robert, however, wasn't convinced. This is exactly the kind of wishful thinking that tanks companies, he said. You're making emotional arguments dressed up as financial analysis. Yes, employee satisfaction matters. But we're facing real competitive pressure, real market challenges. We can't afford to gamble company resources on programs that might work if everything goes perfectly. And we can't afford to keep treating our greatest asset, our people, as expendable resources, Daniel shot back. You want to talk about competitive pressure? Our biggest competitor just lost 3 senior engineers to a startup that offers better work-life balance. We're hemorrhaging talent to companies that invest in employee development while we're arguing about whether people deserve basic training opportunities. That's anecdotal. It's representative of a trend. And if we don't address it, we're going to keep losing our best people to organizations that actually value them. The room had gone very quiet. Victoria was watching the exchange with an unreadable expression. Robert stood, matching Daniel's posture. Let me be clear about something, Mr. Brooks. I've been CFO of this company for 8 years. I've navigated recessions, market crashes, and hostile takeover attempts. I've kept us solvent through challenges you can't even imagine. And I'm telling you, as someone with actual financial expertise, that these programs are too risky given our current position. And I'm telling you, as someone who's actually talked to our employees, that not implementing them is riskier. Daniel didn't back down. You want to protect the company's financial health? Great. So do I. But you can't cut your way to prosperity. You can't squeeze efficiency out of demoralized workers. You can't build a sustainable business on the backs of people who feel undervalued and exploited. This is naive idealism. This is basic human psychology backed by decades of organizational research. Daniel clicked to his bibliography. I cited 43 peer-reviewed studies in this report. I interviewed 15 companies that implemented similar programs. I built conservative financial models that account for every risk you identified. This isn't idealism. It's strategy grounded in evidence and empathy. Robert's face had gone red. You've been in this role for 3 weeks, and you think you understand business better than... Gentlemen, Victoria's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Sit down, both of you. They sat. Victoria stood and moved to the front of the room, commanding attention without raising her voice. Robert, you're right that we face competitive pressure. You're right that we need to be careful with resources. Your caution has saved this company more than once, and I value that. She paused. But Daniel is also right. We've been so focused on financial metrics that we've lost sight of the human infrastructure that makes those metrics possible. And that short-sightedness is costing us. She turned to the full group. Here's what's going to happen. We're implementing Daniel's training programs on a pilot basis, 3 departments over 3 months. We'll track every metric: productivity, turnover, satisfaction, innovation, cost. If the results don't justify the investment, we'll reassess. But we're giving this a real chance, not killing it before it starts, because it makes us uncomfortable. Robert started to protest, but Victoria raised her hand. This isn't up for debate. I'm the CEO, and this is my decision. You can support it, you can remain neutral, or you can resign. Those are your options. The silence that followed was absolute. Daniel realized he'd been holding his breath. Finally, Robert spoke, his voice tight. I'll support it, but I'm documenting my concerns, and when this fails, I'm going to remind everyone that I warned against it. Fair enough, Victoria said. Daniel, work with Rachel to select the pilot departments and design the evaluation framework. I want monthly progress reports. Margaret, I'd like its participation in the pilot. Your team has specifically requested more technical training. James, manufacturing as well. Sandra, let's hold marketing in reserve as a comparison group. The meeting continued for another hour, working through logistics and timelines and resource allocation. By the end, Daniel had a clear mandate and a 3-month deadline to prove his approach worked. As people filed out, Rachel squeezed his arm. That took guts. Robert doesn't usually back down that easily. I don't think he backed down. I think Victoria forced him to choose between supporting the decision and losing his job. Either way, you've got your shot. Don't waste it. Margaret stopped by his office later that afternoon. My team is actually excited about this, she said. They've been asking for advanced technical training for over a year. The fact that it's finally happening, that someone listened, that matters. I just hope we can deliver results that justify the faith Victoria's putting in us. You will. Because unlike Robert, you understand that people aren't algorithms. You can't optimize human beings the way you optimize code. You have to actually care about them. She smiled slightly. Besides, IT workers are competitive. If you tell us we're part of a pilot that needs to succeed, we'll make damn sure it succeeds just to prove we're better than the other departments. Once after she left, Daniel pulled out his phone and texted his mother, "You were right about everything. Thank you for the reminder about what matters most." Her response came quickly. How did the meeting go? Better than expected. Got approval for the pilot programs, 3 months to prove this works. Proud of you. Emma wants to know if you're still making her penguin pancakes tomorrow. Daniel smiled. Tell her absolutely. Every Saturday from now on. It's our new tradition. That evening, he kept his promise. He left the office at 4:30, picked Emma up from his mother's house, and took her to the park even though it was cold enough that their breath made clouds in the air. They fed ducks stale bread Emma had saved from lunch. They played on swings until Emma's cheeks were bright red from the wind. They got hot chocolate from the vendor who always set up near the pond. "Daddy?" Emma asked as they sat on a bench watching the sun set over the lake. "Yes, sweetheart? Are you happy again?" The question hit him harder than it should have. He pulled her closer, wrapping his coat around both of them. "I'm getting there. Some days are hard. Some days I'm stressed about work. But I'm learning that the hard days don't matter as much when I've got you." "Good. Because I like it when you smile. You haven't been smiling very much." "I'm going to smile more. I promise." Emma snuggled against him. "Can we stay here until the stars come out?" "Absolutely." They stayed until the first stars appeared, bright pinpoints against the darkening sky. Emma pointed out constellations she'd learned about in school, getting most of them wrong, but telling the stories with such confidence that Daniel didn't correct her. This was what mattered. This moment. This connection. This promise that work would never steal what was most important. Monday morning, Daniel launched the pilot programs with a kickoff meeting that brought together employees from IT, manufacturing, and several volunteers from other departments who'd heard about the initiative and wanted to participate. The room was packed, standing room only, which told him something about how hungry people were for investment in their development. He stood at the front of the room, looking at faces that ranged from skeptical to hopeful to cautiously optimistic. "Thank you all for being here," he said. "Over the next 3 months, we're going to try something different. We're going to build training programs designed around what you actually need, not what management thinks you need. We're going to invest in your development because we believe you're worth investing in, and we're going to prove that companies can be both profitable and humane." A hand went up in the back. Marcus, from maintenance. "Yeah, we've heard this before," Marcus said. "Every few years, management gets excited about employee development. They launch some big initiative with lots of fanfare. Then budget cuts happen, or priorities shift, or leadership changes, and the whole thing disappears. Why should we believe this time is different?" It was a fair question. Daniel had expected it. "Because this time you have leverage," he said. "Victoria has committed publicly to this approach. She's staked her reputation on it. The board is watching. Investors are watching. If we fail, it's not just your careers at risk, it's hers, which means she has every incentive to make this work and every reason to fight for the resources you need." "And if the pilot fails," someone else asked, "if the numbers don't work out the way you're promising?" "Then we learn from it. We adjust. We try something different. But we don't give up on the fundamental idea that investing in people is good business." Daniel paused. "I'm not going to lie to you. Some people want this to fail. Some executives think treating employees well is naive. Some investors think we should maximize profit at any cost. But Victoria and I, and everyone else who believes in this approach, we're willing to fight for it. The question is whether you're willing to meet us halfway." Sarah spoke up from the middle of the room. "What does meeting you halfway look like?" "It looks like participating fully, giving honest feedback, telling us when something isn't working instead of just complaining about it later, holding us accountable to our promises, and most importantly, showing up ready to learn and grow and become better versions of yourselves professionally." The room was quiet for a moment. Then Margaret stood. "I want to say something," she said, turning to face the group instead of Daniel. "I've been at this company for 6 years. I've sat in executive meetings where employees were discussed like line items in a budget, where layoffs were considered purely in terms of cost savings without any thought to the human impact. And I've watched good people leave because they felt undervalued and stuck." She gestured to Daniel. "This man challenged all of that. He walked into his first executive meeting and told us, to our faces, that we'd lost touch with the people who actually make this company function. He's fighting for programs that benefit you with no direct benefit to himself. And he's doing it knowing that if he fails, his career is probably over." She sat back down. "So yeah, I think this time is different, and I think we owe it to ourselves to give it a real shot." The energy in the room shifted. People started asking practical questions about training schedules, subject areas, skill development pathways. The skepticism didn't disappear, but it transformed into something more constructive, cautious engagement rather than defensive dismissal. Daniel spent the next 2 hours working with the group to design programs that actually addressed their needs. The IT team wanted advanced certifications in emerging technologies. Manufacturing wanted safety training and equipment operation skills that would qualify them for higher-paying positions. The volunteers from other departments wanted project management skills, communication training, leadership development. By the end of the session, they had a framework, imperfect, ambitious, probably overreaching in places, but built collaboratively instead of handed down from executive decree. As people filed out, Marcus approached Daniel. "My daughter got accepted to 3 colleges," he said without preamble. "Marcus, that's amazing. Congratulations." "Yeah, problem is I still can't afford any of them. Even with financial aid, the gap is too big." Marcus crossed his arms. "So here's my test for whether this program is real. I need training that qualifies me for facilities management positions. Real management, not just crew leader. Those positions pay $15,000 more annually. That $15,000 means my daughter goes to college or she doesn't. He looked Daniel straight in the eye. Can you make that happen? Or is this just another corporate program that makes leadership feel good but doesn't actually change anything for people like me? Daniel thought about Emma and the promise he'd made to prioritize her. He thought about Marcus's daughter, equally deserving, equally important. He thought about Victoria's words that first night, that every number on a spreadsheet was a person with a life that mattered. I'll make it happen, Daniel said. Give me your contact information. We're going to build a facilities management training track, and you're going to be the first person to complete it. And when you finish, I'm personally going to recommend you for the next management position that opens up. And if there are no openings, then we'll create one. We're restructuring this company anyway. Might as well do it in a way that promotes from within instead of hiring externally. Marcus studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, I'm holding you to that. I hope you do. Over the next month, the pilot programs consumed Daniel's professional life. He worked with external vendors to develop certification courses. He coordinated with department heads to allow employees time for training. He built evaluation frameworks to track every metric Robert might use to attack the initiative. He held weekly check-ins with participants to address problems before they became crises. It was exhausting, but it was also exhilarating in a way his old analyst job had never been. Because every training session he attended, every employee he talked to, every small victory they celebrated together, it all mattered in immediate, tangible ways. He wasn't optimizing abstract processes. He was helping real people develop real skills that would improve their real lives. And he did it while making sure he picked Emma up at 3:15 every day. While attending her school play where she played a penguin in the class production about Antarctica. While having Saturday penguin pancakes and Sunday park visits and bedtime stories every single night. His mother had been right. The work was still there when he returned to it. But Emma's childhood wouldn't wait. 6 weeks into the pilot, Margaret called an emergency meeting. Daniel arrived at her office expecting crisis, but instead found her grinning. You need to see this, she said, pulling up a dashboard on her screen. Productivity data from the IT department. We're up 18% since the training program started. 18%, Daniel. Do you know what that means? That we're beating the conservative estimates? That we're destroying them. If these numbers hold, the increased output more than pays for the entire training program in less than a year. Robert can't argue with math like this. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest, tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. What about manufacturing? Any data there yet? James said they're seeing improvements, but wants another month of data before committing to numbers. He's cautious, but I can tell he's impressed. Margaret leaned back in her chair. You did it, Daniel. You're actually proving this works. We did it. None of this happens without your team buying in. True, but you gave us something to buy into. You listened when everyone else was just measuring productivity and wondering why morale kept dropping. She pulled up another screen. Also, I have 5 people asking about the facilities management training Marcus is doing. Word is spreading that these programs lead somewhere real. Daniel pulled out his phone and texted Victoria. IT productivity up 18%. Margaret has the data. Thought you should know. Her response came immediately. Board meeting tomorrow. This is exactly what I needed. Thank you. The board meeting happened behind closed doors, but Victoria texted Daniel updates throughout the afternoon. Some members remained skeptical. Some were cautiously optimistic. But the productivity data was undeniable, and even the most resistant directors had to acknowledge that the pilot was working better than projected. By the end of the day, the board had approved expansion of the training programs to all departments, with a budget increase that would allow Daniel to develop even more comprehensive offerings. He texted his mother, We won. The programs are expanding company-wide. Her response made him smile. Proud of you. Emma wants to celebrate. She's demanding we take you out for ice cream. Tell her I'll be there in 20 minutes. Best offer I've had all day. That evening, sitting in an ice cream shop with Emma on one side and his mother on the other, Daniel felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The bone-deep satisfaction of knowing he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. Emma had chocolate ice cream all over her face. His mother was telling embarrassing stories about his childhood. The day's victory felt real and earned, and worth every sleepless night. Every confrontation with Robert, every moment of doubt. "Daddy?" Emma asked, looking up at him with those serious 7-year-old eyes. "Yeah, sweetheart? Are you helping people now, like you wanted to?" Daniel pulled her close, not caring that she was getting ice cream on his jacket. "Yeah," he said. "I think I finally am." The crisis hit on a Tuesday morning in early March. Daniel was reviewing training completion rates when his phone rang with a call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Brooks? This is Amanda Chen from the Chicago Tribune business section. I'm calling about the allegations that surfaced this morning regarding Arcadia Technologies' restructuring decisions. Do you have any comment?" Daniel's blood went cold. "What allegations? You haven't seen it? There's an article in Business Insider claiming that Arcadia's rejection of the January restructuring proposal was based on personal relationships rather than sound business judgment. Specifically, that CEO Victoria Lane made the decision after consulting with a maintenance worker she was romantically involved with and later promoted that individual to an executive position as compensation." The words hit like physical blows. Daniel managed to say something about no comment and ended the call, then immediately pulled up Business Insider on his computer. The article was already trending. The headline screamed, "Arcadia CEO's alleged affair influences major corporate decision, costs shareholders millions." The piece was written by someone named Marcus Thornton, described as having sources close to Arcadia's board. It outlined Victoria's rejection of the restructuring proposal, her subsequent promotion of Daniel, and painted the entire situation as a scandal involving romantic entanglement, nepotism, and gross mismanagement of corporate responsibility. The article included quotes from anonymous board members expressing concern about Victoria's judgment. It referenced the 3 directors who'd resigned, framing their departure not as a principled disagreement, but as disgust over Victoria's alleged impropriety. It even included speculation about whether shareholders should demand Victoria's removal. None of it was true, but it was written with enough careful legal language that it couldn't be dismissed as simple lies. Instead, it took real facts. Victoria's midnight visit to Daniel's apartment, his rapid promotion, the board resignations, and constructed a narrative that transformed everything into something sordid and corrupt. Daniel's phone started ringing constantly. Other reporters, colleagues wanting to know if it was true. His mother, worried and confused. He ignored them all and called Victoria. "I've seen it," she said before he could speak. Her voice was tight, controlled in a way that told Daniel she was barely holding herself together. "Emergency executive meeting in 20 minutes. Conference room. Don't talk to any reporters." The conference room was chaos when Daniel arrived. Every executive was already there, plus several board members Daniel didn't recognize, and Arcadia's head of PR, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Williams who looked like she hadn't slept. Victoria stood at the head of the table, and Daniel was shocked by how composed she appeared. No sign of the vulnerability he'd seen on New Year's Eve. No crack in the armor. She was every inch the CEO, and the message was clear. Whatever was happening, she would handle it with absolute professionalism. "All right," Victoria said once Daniel sat down. "Everyone's read the article. Let's address the facts. First, did I visit Daniel's home on New Year's Eve? Yes. Second, was that visit romantic in nature? Absolutely not. I went to him because he was one of the few people in this company I could trust to give me honest advice about a decision that would affect hundreds of lives. Third, did that conversation influence my rejection of the restructuring proposal? Yes. It reminded me why I built this company and what my values actually are." Robert leaned forward. "With all due respect, Victoria, that's not going to satisfy anyone. The optics are terrible. You went to a subordinate's home at midnight, then promoted him weeks later to a senior position. Whether or not there was romantic involvement, it looks inappropriate. I went to someone's home seeking counsel. I promoted him because he was qualified and brought a perspective we desperately needed. Neither of those actions was inappropriate." "But they can be made to look inappropriate," Patricia interjected. "And in the current media environment, perception matters more than truth. We need to get ahead of this before it spirals further." One of the board members Daniel didn't recognize spoke up. "I think we need to seriously consider asking for Mr. Brooks' resignation. Not because he did anything wrong, but because his continued presence gives credence to the allegations. Daniel felt the room shift. Several executives wouldn't meet his eyes. Even Rachel looked uncomfortable. Absolutely not, Victoria said, her voice like steel. Daniel has done nothing wrong. His work over the past 3 months has been exceptional. The training programs he developed are exceeding every metric. I'm not sacrificing him to appease reporters who are more interested in scandal than truth. Then what do you suggest? The board member asked. Because doing nothing isn't an option. Our stock price has already dropped 2% this morning. Investors are calling. Other media outlets are picking up the story. This is becoming a crisis. Patricia pulled up a presentation on the screen. Here's what I recommend. First, we release a statement categorically denying any romantic involvement between Victoria and Daniel. Second, we provide context about the New Year's Eve meeting, that Victoria was seeking employee input on a major decision, which is actually good corporate governance. Third, we highlight the success of Daniel's programs with hard data to demonstrate that his promotion was merit-based. Will that be enough? James asked. Probably not, but it's a start. The bigger issue is that someone inside Arcadia leaked this story. Someone with access to confidential information about board discussions and Victoria's personal schedule. Until we identify and address that leak, we're vulnerable to additional attacks. Kevin, the general counsel, was taking rapid notes. We should also consider legal action against Business Insider if we can prove actual malice or reckless disregard for truth. That could make it worse, Patricia countered. Nothing feeds a scandal like a lawsuit trying to suppress it. The discussion continued for another hour, with various strategies proposed and debated. Daniel sat mostly silent, feeling like he was watching his career implode in real time. Everything he'd worked for, everything he'd built, everything he'd proven, all of it overshadowed by insinuations and allegations that had no basis in reality. Finally, Victoria called for a break. As people filed out, she caught Daniel's arm. My office. Now. Once behind closed doors, Victoria's composure finally cracked. She sank into her chair and pressed her hands against her face. I'm so sorry, she said. This is my fault. I should have anticipated how that visit would look. I should have been more careful about... Stop, Daniel said firmly. You did nothing wrong. You sought advice from someone you trusted. That's not a crime. That's not even questionable judgment. But it's being used against you, against us, against everything we're trying to build. Because someone wants it to be. Daniel moved closer. Patricia was right. Someone leaked this story. Someone with inside knowledge. Someone who wants to discredit you and destroy the programs we've implemented. We need to figure out who. Victoria looked up at him, and he saw the exhaustion in her eyes. I have a pretty good idea who. Robert? Maybe. Or one of the board members who resigned. Or an investor who's been calling for my removal since January. The list of people who want me gone is longer than I'd like to admit. What do you want to do? Victoria stood and walked to her window, that same gesture Daniel had seen so many times now. The gesture that meant she was gathering strength, finding her center, preparing for battle. I want to fight, she said. I want to prove every allegation false. I want to demonstrate that our approach works, that investing in people is good business, that integrity matters. But I also want to protect you. And I'm not sure I can do both. Then don't protect me. I'm an adult. I knew the risks when I took this job. Did you? Did you really anticipate that 3 months in you'd be facing allegations of corruption and questions about whether you slept your way into your position? The crude language was so unlike Victoria that Daniel was momentarily stunned. Then he understood. She was furious. Not at him, but at the situation, at the forces trying to destroy what they'd built, at a world where doing the right thing somehow made you vulnerable to attack. No, he admitted. I didn't anticipate this specific scenario, but I did know that people would resist, that they'd fight back, that they'd use whatever weapons they could find to undermine change they didn't like. He moved to stand beside her at the window. Here's what I know, he continued. Those training programs are working, employee satisfaction is up, turnover is down, productivity is improving. We're proving that companies can treat people well and still be profitable. That matters more than some hack journalist's conspiracy theory. But what about Emma? What happens when this story spreads and other parents at her school start whispering? When she hears rumors about her father and wants to know what they mean? Daniel's stomach clenched. He hadn't thought about that, hadn't considered how this might touch his daughter's life. "I'll handle it," he said, with more confidence than he felt. "I'll tell her the truth. That some people don't like change, so they make up stories to hurt the people trying to change things. She'll understand. She's 7 years old. She's also smart. And she knows her dad. She knows I wouldn't lie to her." Victoria turned away from the window. "I'm going to issue a statement this afternoon. Clear, direct, completely denying any inappropriate relationship. Then I'm going to double down on the training programs. If someone wants to attack me for investing in employees, fine. Let's make it absolutely clear that's exactly what I'm doing, and I'm not apologizing for it. What do you need from me? Honestly? I need you to keep doing what you're doing. Keep running the programs, keep getting results, keep proving that this approach works. The best response to this attack is success." Daniel nodded. "Then that's what I'll do." The statement went out at 2:00. It was exactly what Victoria had promised: clear, direct, professional. It denied any romantic relationship, explained the context of the New Year's Eve meeting, and highlighted the measurable success of the training programs. It was backed by data, by testimonials from employees, by hard evidence that Daniel's promotion had been merit-based and valuable to the company. The media response was mixed. Some outlets accepted the explanation. Others doubled down on the scandal narrative, publishing follow-up pieces questioning whether the statement was truthful, whether the data was manipulated, whether Victoria was simply protecting herself and her alleged paramour. Daniel's phone continued to ring with reporter requests. He ignored them all, following Patricia's advice to stay completely silent. Instead, he focused on work. He held a scheduled training session with the manufacturing department. He met with Marcus to review his facilities management certification progress. He approved budget allocations for new programs in customer service and sales. Normal work. Important work. Work that mattered regardless of what journalists were writing. At 3:15, he picked Emma up from school exactly as promised. She bounced into the car full of stories about her day, completely oblivious to the crisis consuming her father's professional life. Daniel was grateful for that innocence, even as he dreaded the moment it would end. That evening, after Emma was in bed, Daniel called his mother. "I saw the article," she said immediately. "It's garbage, complete garbage. But I'm worried about how this affects you and Emma. I'm handling it. Are you? Because your voice says you're barely holding it together." Daniel sank onto his couch, suddenly exhausted. "I don't know what to do, Mom. Everything I've worked for is being twisted into something ugly. People are questioning my integrity, my competence, my motives. And the worst part is, there's nothing I can do to stop it. I can't prove a negative. I can't prove that nothing happened between me and Victoria. You don't have to prove it to strangers. You have to know it yourself and trust that the people who matter also know it. But what about Emma? What happens when she hears about it, you tell her the truth? You explain that sometimes people make up stories about others because they don't like change. You show her that you're not ashamed because you didn't do anything wrong. You model integrity under pressure." Daniel closed his eyes. "I'm scared, Mom. I'm scared this will destroy everything. The programs, my career, Victoria's company, everything we've built." "Then fight for it. You and Victoria. Fight for what you've built because it matters. Because those training programs are changing lives. Because Marcus's daughter might get to go to college because of the work you're doing. Because you're proving that businesses can be both profitable and humane." What if fighting isn't enough? Then at least you'll know you tried. At least you won't look back and wonder what would have happened if you'd had the courage to keep going. They talked for another hour, and by the end, Daniel felt steadier. Not fixed, not resolved, but steadier. Ready to face whatever came next. The next morning, Daniel arrived at work to find a small crowd gathered outside the building. Protesters holding signs that read, "Arcadia employees demand answers, and corporate corruption must end." For a horrible moment, Daniel thought they were protesting against him and Victoria. Then he saw Marcus at the front of the group. Daniel approached slowly, confused. Marcus saw him and waved him over. "What's going on?" Daniel asked. "Counter-protest," Marcus said with a grin. We heard about the article. We know it's bullshit, so we decided to make some noise about it. Sarah appeared beside Marcus, holding a sign that read, "Daniel Brooks changed my life. These programs matter." She smiled at Daniel's shocked expression. "You think we're going to let some reporter destroy the best thing that's happened to this company in years?" she said. "Not happening." More employees Daniel recognized from the training programs crowded around. Diego from security, several IT workers from Margaret's department, manufacturing workers who'd completed safety certifications, customer service reps who'd gained new skills, all of them holding signs, all of them there to support the programs and the people who'd fought for them. "We already talked to some of the reporters who were here," Marcus continued. "Told them the real story, about how these programs gave us opportunities we never had before, about how you and Victoria actually listened to us instead of just extracting value, about how this company finally feels like it cares about employees." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "You didn't have to do this." "Yeah, we did, because you fought for us. Now we're fighting for you." A reporter approached with a camera crew. "Mr. Brooks, can we get a statement about the allegations?" Before Daniel could respond, Sarah stepped forward. "I'll give you a statement. Daniel Brooks promoted me from the mailroom to an administrative assistant position after I completed his leadership training program. He saw potential in me that nobody else saw. He invested in me when I'd been invisible to management for 8 years. That's not corruption. That's what leadership should look like." Another employee spoke up. "I'm a single parent, just like Daniel. He built flexible training schedules so parents like us could participate without sacrificing time with our kids. That's not favoritism. That's understanding what employees actually need." Marcus pushed forward. "My daughter got accepted to college. I couldn't afford it until Daniel helped me get certified for a facilities management position with higher pay. In 4 months, I'll finish the program and get promoted. That promotion means my daughter goes to college instead of working minimum wage jobs. You want to talk about what Daniel Brooks has done? Talk about that." The reporter was frantically taking notes. Other media outlets started approaching, realizing there was a different story here than the scandal narrative they'd been chasing. Daniel stood there, surrounded by employees who'd become colleagues, who'd become something like friends, and felt something shift. The fear didn't disappear. The vulnerability didn't vanish, but it transformed into something else. Determination reinforced by community, strength borrowed from people who believed in what they were building together. Victoria appeared in the building's entrance, drawn by the commotion. She stopped when she saw the crowd, the signs, the cameras. For a moment, her controlled CEO facade cracked, and Daniel saw raw emotion cross her face. She walked down the steps and stood beside Daniel. "Thank you," she said to the assembled employees. "Thank you for standing up, for speaking truth, for reminding everyone what this company is really about." "We're not doing this for you," Marcus said bluntly. "I mean, no offense, but we're doing this because these programs matter to us, because our lives are actually better because of what you and Daniel built, and we're not letting some corporate hit piece destroy that." Victoria smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. "None taken. And thank you anyway." The protest-turned-press conference continued for another hour. Employee after employee shared their stories. The media narrative began to shift from scandal to human interest, from allegations of corruption to examples of corporate programs that actually helped workers. By noon, several major outlets had published counterpieces highlighting the employee support. Business Insider was facing backlash for their original article's reliance on anonymous sources and speculation. The stock price that had dropped 2% yesterday recovered, and then some as investors recognized that employee satisfaction was actually a market advantage. Daniel and Victoria stood together watching it unfold, neither quite believing what was happening. "Did we just turn a crisis into a public relations victory?" Victoria asked. "I think the employees did that. We just gave them something worth fighting for." That afternoon, Robert appeared at Daniel's office door. His expression was complicated, not hostile, but not friendly either. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Of course." Robert came in and closed the door. He stood there for a moment, clearly struggling with something. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "I've been fighting your program since day one, questioning your qualifications, undermining your budget requests, making things harder than they needed to be. I know. Yeah, I figured you did. Robert moved to the window. I told myself I was protecting the company, that I was being the responsible adult in the room while you and Victoria played with idealistic experiments. But watching those employees today, hearing what these programs mean to them, I realized I was wrong. He turned to face Daniel. I still think you move too fast. I still think some of your initiatives are financially risky. But I was wrong to dismiss the fundamental premise. Wrong to treat employees as resources instead of people. Wrong to assume that caring about workers was incompatible with running a profitable business. Daniel leaned back in his chair. What changed your mind? It can't just be today's protest. It wasn't. It was the data. Margaret's productivity numbers. The turnover reduction. The internal promotion rates. The employee satisfaction scores. I kept waiting for the metrics to show that your approach was failing, and they kept showing the opposite. And I finally had to admit that maybe, just maybe, you and Victoria were right about this. That must have been hard for you. You have no idea. Robert almost smiled. I've been CFO for 8 years. I've built my entire career on traditional financial management. Admitting that there's a better way means admitting I've been doing it wrong for a long time. Or it means you're willing to learn and adapt. That's not weakness, that's growth. Robert studied him for a long moment. I understand why Victoria promoted you now. You see things differently than people who've been in corporate culture too long. You ask different questions. You measure different things. That's valuable, even when it's uncomfortable. He moved toward the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, I know there was nothing inappropriate about your relationship with Victoria. I never believed those allegations, but I should have said that publicly instead of staying silent. Say it now. The reporters are still outside. Robert's eyebrows rose. You want me to defend you to the press? I want you to tell the truth. If you believe the allegations are false, say so. If you think these programs are working, say that too. The best way to kill a scandal is to make the truth more interesting than the lies. All right, I'll do it. Robert opened the door, then paused. Thank you for pushing this company to be better, for not giving up when I made things difficult, for proving that integrity and profitability aren't mutually exclusive. After Robert left, Daniel sat in his office feeling like he'd just witnessed something significant. Not a dramatic transformation. Robert was still Robert, still cautious and conservative and driven by financial metrics. But he'd admitted he was wrong. He'd acknowledged that Daniel's approach had merit. He'd committed to supporting instead of undermining. It wasn't everything, but it was something. That evening, Daniel took Emma to their favorite ice cream shop. She ordered her usual, chocolate with rainbow sprinkles, and they sat by the window watching people pass by. Daddy, some kids at school said you're famous, Emma said, swinging her legs under the table. Daniel's heart sank. What did they say exactly? That you were in the news. That people were talking about you on TV. Is that true? Sort of. Some reporters wrote stories about my work. Are you in trouble? No, sweetheart. Some people wrote things that weren't true, but a lot of people stood up and told the real story. It's all okay now. Emma considered this seriously. Like when Tommy said I pushed him on the playground, but I didn't? And then Sarah and Miguel told the teacher what really happened. Exactly like that. So people lied about you, but your friends told the truth? Yes. That's good. I'm glad you have friends who tell the truth. Emma returned her attention to her ice cream, the matter apparently settled in her 7-year-old mind. Daniel felt something release in his chest. His mother had been right. Emma understood better than he'd given her credit for. She'd grasped the essential truth, that lies could be countered by truth, that friends mattered, that her father wasn't in trouble. You know what, sweetheart? He said. What? I'm really lucky to have you. Emma grinned, chocolate smeared across her face. I know, Daddy. You tell me that all the time. They finished their ice cream and walked home hand in hand. Above them, the early evening sky was clear and bright. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new obstacles, new battles to fight. But tonight, Daniel had his daughter's hand in his, the knowledge that employees believed in what he was building, and the certainty that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The crisis wasn't over. The resistance hadn't disappeared. The fight would continue. But they were winning. One honest conversation at a time. One employee success story at a time. one moment of integrity at a time. And that, Daniel thought as Emma chattered about penguins and school and tomorrow's plans, was exactly how you change the world. Not with grand gestures or dramatic pronouncements, but with consistent choices that prioritize people over profit, humanity over efficiency, truth over convenience. Victoria had found that courage on New Year's Eve. Daniel had found it when he chose Emma over his career 4 years ago. And together, they were building something that proved courage was contagious. That integrity mattered. That treating people well wasn't just moral, it was the smartest business decision they could make. The morning of the annual shareholder meeting arrived with unseasonable warmth for late October. Daniel stood in front of his bathroom mirror adjusting his tie for the third time, his hands shaking slightly despite 10 months of experience in executive meetings. This was different. This wasn't internal debate or departmental strategy sessions. This was Victoria presenting the results of her year-long experiment to the people who actually owned the company, people who cared about returns and dividends and market position more than employee satisfaction or training programs. Emma appeared in the doorway, already dressed for school in the outfit she'd carefully chosen the night before. "You look fancy, Daddy," she said. "Big meeting today, sweetheart. Very important people who need to hear about all the work we've been doing. Are you nervous?" Daniel smiled at her reflection in the mirror. "Yeah, I am." "That's okay, Miss Anderson says being nervous means you care about doing something good." Emma moved closer and adjusted his tie with the same serious concentration she brought to her homework. "There. Now you're perfect." "Thank you, baby. What would I do without you?" "Probably have a crooked tie forever." She grinned and hugged him. "You're going to do great. I know it." Daniel dropped her at school with extra time to spare, watching as she ran to join her friends on the playground. She'd grown so much in the past year, not just physically, though she'd shot up 3 inches, but in confidence and security. She knew her father would always be there at 3:15, knew that his work mattered, but she mattered more, knew that promises made were promises kept. The shareholder meeting was being held in a downtown hotel ballroom large enough to accommodate the 300 investors who'd requested to attend in person, plus another 500 joining virtually. Daniel arrived early and found Victoria already there, reviewing her presentation notes with Patricia Williams. "Morning," Victoria said, looking up. Her expression was calm, but Daniel had learned to read the tension in her shoulders, the tightness around her eyes. She was as nervous as he was, just better at hiding it. "Morning. How are you feeling?" "Like I'm about to defend my entire leadership philosophy to a room full of people who fundamentally disagree with it." She managed a slight smile. "So, normal." Patricia closed her laptop. "The media coverage has been overwhelmingly positive since the employee protest in March. We've had features in Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and Fast Company about Arcadia's innovative approach to workforce development. Your approval ratings among employees are at 87%, which is virtually unheard of in a company this size." "But the shareholders don't care about employee approval ratings," Victoria said. "They care about stock performance and dividend payments, which are both up," Daniel pointed out. "Stock price has increased 23% since January. Revenue is up 18% year over year. Profit margins have improved despite the investment in training programs." "I know the numbers. I also know that correlation doesn't equal causation in their minds. They'll argue the market lifted all tech stocks, that our growth had nothing to do with employee programs, that we could have done even better with the original restructuring plan." Daniel recognized the fear talking, the same fear he'd seen on New Year's Eve when Victoria had stood in his living room wondering if she had the courage to choose people over profit. The difference now was that she had data, results, proof that her choice had been right. "Then we show them the causation," Daniel said. "We show them that our turnover rate dropped 42% after implementing the training programs, that internal promotion increased by 68%, that employee-driven innovation resulted in 3 new product features that generated millions in additional revenue. The customers specifically cite our employee knowledge and service as reasons they choose us over competitors." Victoria met his eyes. "You've come a long way from the maintenance worker who was terrified of his first executive meeting. I had a good teacher who showed me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right despite being terrified." Patricia gathered her materials. "The meeting starts in 20 minutes. I'll be monitoring social media and press coverage in real time. If any narratives start emerging that we need to address, I'll send you a message." She paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I think you're going to win this. The numbers are too strong to argue with." After she left, Victoria and Daniel stood alone in the empty ballroom. In an hour, it would be filled with shareholders, board members, media representatives, and employees who'd requested to attend. The energy would be intense, the scrutiny brutal, the stakes impossibly high. "I couldn't have done this without you," Victoria said quietly. "Any of it. The courage to reject the restructuring, the vision for what we could build instead. The persistence to fight through all the resistance. You gave me that." "No, you already had it. I just reminded you it was there." "Maybe, but that reminder changed everything." She turned to face him fully. "Whatever happens today, I want you to know that this year has been the most meaningful of my career. Not because of stock prices or revenue growth, but because we proved that businesses can be both profitable and humane. That treating people well isn't weakness, that integrity matters." "Whatever happens today," Daniel echoed. "That sounds like you're expecting the worst." "I'm preparing for any outcome, including the possibility that shareholders vote no confidence and remove me as CEO. It's not likely, but it's possible." Daniel felt ice settle in his stomach. He hadn't seriously considered that outcome, hadn't let himself imagine what would happen if Victoria lost her position after fighting so hard for what they'd built. "If they remove you, they'll dismantle everything. The training programs, the employee initiatives, all of it. Probably, which is why we're going to make damn sure they don't remove me." The ballroom filled quickly. Daniel recognized faces from the board, from various investor groups, from media outlets that had been covering Arcadia's story. He also saw employees scattered throughout the crowd, Marcus and Sarah and Diego, and dozens of others who'd asked for time off to attend. Their presence was a statement in itself. Victoria took the stage at exactly 10 o'clock. The room fell silent. "Good morning, and thank you for being here," she began. "1 year ago, I stood before this group and announced that Arcadia would be rejecting a restructuring proposal that would have eliminated over 600 positions. Many of you were furious. Some of you demanded my resignation. Others threatened to pull your investments. You told me I was being emotional, naive, irresponsible, that I was sacrificing shareholder value for sentiment, that I was destroying everything we'd built." She paused, letting the memory of that conflict settle over the room. "Today, I'm here to show you what actually happened when we chose people over profit margins, when we invested in employees instead of eliminating them, when we built programs designed to develop human potential instead of extract maximum productivity." The screen behind her lit up with data, stock performance charts, revenue graphs, profit margin trends, every metric moving in the right direction. Our stock price has increased 23%. Our revenue is up 18%. Our profit margins have improved by 4 points. We've launched 3 new product features that generated $42 million in additional revenue. We've expanded into 2 new markets. We've won industry awards for innovation and customer service. By every traditional business metric, Arcadia has had its most successful year in company history. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Victoria clicked to the next slide. "But here's what makes this growth different from typical corporate expansion. We achieved it while simultaneously increasing employee satisfaction, reducing turnover, and investing millions in workforce development. We proved that you don't have to choose between profitability and treating people well, that these goals aren't mutually exclusive, that, in fact, investing in employees drives better business outcomes." She walked to the edge of the stage, addressing the room directly rather than hiding behind the podium. "Our turnover rate dropped 42% after implementing comprehensive training programs. Do you know what that means financially? It means we saved $7.3 million in recruitment and onboarding costs. It means we retained institutional knowledge that makes us more efficient and innovative. It means our customers interact with experienced employees who actually understand their needs." Another slide appeared showing comparison data with competitors. "Our internal promotion rate increased 68%. We're developing talent from within instead of constantly hiring externally. That creates career pathways for employees, which increases motivation and loyalty. It also means we're promoting people who already understand our culture and values, which maintains consistency and reduces integration costs. Victoria's voice grew stronger, more passionate. Our employee-driven innovation program, where we actually listened to suggestions from people doing the work, resulted in process improvements that saved us $12 million annually. $12 million because we trusted that the maintenance worker might have insights about facility efficiency, that the customer service representative might understand client needs better than executives in meetings. She clicked again, and employee testimonials filled the screen. Marcus talking about his daughter starting college. Sarah describing her promotion from mailroom to administration. A manufacturing worker explaining how safety training had prevented a potentially fatal accident. An IT specialist detailing how certification programs had advanced her career. These aren't just numbers, Victoria said. These are people whose lives changed because we chose to invest in them. People who are now more productive, more loyal, more innovative because they know they work for a company that values them, and that value translates directly into business success. A hand went up in the audience, one of the major investors who'd been most vocal about opposing Victoria's approach. Ms. Lane, these results are impressive, but how do we know they're sustainable? How do we know this isn't just a temporary bounce that will collapse once the novelty wears off? Excellent question, Victoria said. Daniel, would you address that? Daniel stood and moved to the stage, his heart pounding but his voice steady when he spoke. We've been tracking sustainability indicators throughout the year, he said. Employee engagement scores have remained consistently high, actually increasing slightly each quarter rather than declining. Training program participation rates are at 93% and holding. Exit interviews show that the primary reasons people leave now are retirement or relocation, not dissatisfaction with the company. And we're seeing second-order effects that indicate deep cultural change rather than surface-level improvements. He pulled up a new slide showing progression data. For example, employees who complete training programs are 57% more likely to recommend Arcadia as a workplace. Their referrals have become our primary recruiting source, which reduces hiring costs and improves candidate quality because current employees understand our culture and refer people who fit. That's sustainable advantage that compounds over time. Another investor spoke up. But what about the cost? These programs require ongoing investment. What happens when the next economic downturn hits and we need to cut costs? That's exactly when these programs become most valuable, Daniel responded. In a downturn, companies with loyal, skilled, adaptable employees survive while companies with high turnover and low morale collapse. We're building resilience, not just short-term gains, and the ROI is clear. Every dollar invested in training generates approximately $3 in value through increased productivity, reduced turnover, and innovation. The questions continued for another hour. Some skeptical, some genuinely curious, some openly hostile. Victoria and Daniel answered them all, backing every claim with data, every assertion with evidence, every promise with results already achieved. Finally, one of the board members who'd remained after the January resignation stood. I was one of the people who voted against Ms. Lane's decision last January, he said. I thought she was making a catastrophic mistake. I stayed on the board specifically to document the failure I believed was inevitable. He paused. I was wrong. Completely, embarrassingly wrong. What Victoria and Daniel have built here isn't just good business. It's transformative. It's a model for how companies should operate in the 21st century, and I'm proud to recommend that shareholders give them our full support to continue this work. The room erupted in applause. Not everyone joined in. Daniel saw several investors sitting with arms crossed, still unconvinced. But the majority were clapping, and the energy had shifted from skeptical to supportive. Victoria called for the formal shareholder vote on a resolution of confidence in current leadership and strategic direction. The ballots were distributed, collected, and counted while Patricia gave a presentation on media coverage and brand improvement. 20 minutes later, the results were announced. 78% of shareholders voted confidence in Victoria's leadership. The room exploded with applause and cheers. Employees stood and chanted Victoria's name. Board members shook hands. Even some of the skeptical investors were nodding, acknowledging that the results spoke for themselves. Daniel found himself pulled into a hug by Margaret, who'd been sitting in the employee section. You did it, she said. You actually did it. We did it. All of us together. Marcus appeared next, grinning wider than Daniel had ever seen. My daughter started at Northwestern last month, he said. Full scholarship plus the money I saved from my promotion. She's studying engineering. She's going to build things, Daniel, real things that matter, because you built programs that gave me opportunities I never had. Sarah was crying openly. I got promoted again, did you hear? Junior project manager. Me. The girl who spent 8 years in the mailroom thinking that was all I'd ever be. One by one, employees shared their stories. The manufacturing worker who'd become a safety supervisor. The IT specialist who'd earned advanced certifications and now led her own team. The customer service representative who'd moved into quality assurance. The maintenance worker who'd just been accepted into a management training program. Lives changed, families helped, potential unlocked. This was what success looked like. Not stock prices or profit margins, though those mattered too, but real human flourishing, real dignity restored, real proof that treating people well created value in ways that spreadsheets couldn't fully capture. Victoria found Daniel in the crowd and pulled him aside. We did it, she said simply. Yeah, we really did. I know this year's been hard, the resistance, the scandal, the constant fighting. There were times I almost gave up. But you didn't. Neither did you. Even when it would have been easier to walk away, to go back to a simple life with fewer complications. Daniel thought about his apartment, about Emma, about the choice he'd made 4 years ago to prioritize her over career ambition. That choice had led him here, to this moment, to this proof that integrity and success weren't incompatible. I couldn't walk away, he said, because this matters too much, because those employees' stories matter, because proving that businesses can be both profitable and humane matters, because showing Emma that work can be meaningful matters. Victoria smiled. Speaking of Emma, I believe you have a 3:15 pickup to make. Daniel checked his watch. 2:45. I should probably head out soon. Go now. This is winding down anyway. And Daniel, thank you for everything, for the honesty on New Year's Eve, for taking this job when it seemed impossible, for fighting alongside me when everyone said we were wrong, for being exactly the kind of leader this company needed. Thank you for giving me the chance, for seeing potential in a maintenance worker, for trusting that caring about people wasn't weakness. They shook hands, and then Victoria pulled him into a brief hug. Happy almost New Year, she said. We've got a lot to celebrate this time. Daniel left the ballroom and drove through autumn streets painted gold and red by falling leaves. The city looked different than it had 11 months ago. Or maybe he looked different, saw things through eyes that understood how much could change in a year when you had the courage to choose what mattered. He arrived at Emma's school at 3:12 and waited by the usual spot. When she emerged, she was carrying a large poster board decorated with drawings. Daddy, look what we made in art class. It's about what our parents do for work. The poster showed a stick figure, clearly meant to be Daniel, surrounded by other stick figures with smiles and hearts. At the top, in Emma's careful third-grade handwriting, it read, My dad helps people learn new things so they can have better jobs and take care of their families. Daniel felt his throat tighten. This is beautiful, sweetheart. Ms. Rodriguez said it was the best one in the class because I understood what you really do. Not just the fancy title, but the important part. You're absolutely right. That is the important part. They drove home with the poster carefully secured in the back seat. Emma chattered about her day, about the spelling test she'd aced, about the boy who'd brought a lizard for show and tell, about the pizza party they were planning for the end of the semester. Normal, beautiful, 7-year-old concerns that grounded Daniel in what actually mattered. That evening, after dinner and homework and the Penguin book that Emma had finally moved past but still occasionally requested for nostalgia's sake, Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. The message included a photo. It showed Victoria standing in her office holding a framed copy of the photo from 20 years ago, the young woman with wild optimism starting her first company. But beside it now hung a new photo. Victoria and Daniel at the employee celebration after the March protest, surrounded by people whose lives had been changed by the programs they'd built together. The caption read, Remembering why we started, celebrating what we built, grateful for the courage to choose integrity over ease. Daniel responded, Same here. See you Monday. we've got more work to do. Because that was the truth. The shareholder meeting was a victory, but it wasn't an ending. There were more employees to train, more programs to develop, more battles to fight against people who still believed that profit and humanity were incompatible. But now they had proof. They had data. They had stories. They had a year of results that demonstrated beyond doubt that investing in people wasn't just moral, it was the smartest business decision a company could make. The weeks leading up to New Year's Eve passed in a blur of normal work rhythms that had somehow become extraordinary through their very ordinariness. Daniel attended meetings, reviewed training programs, approved budgets, and picked Emma up at 3:15 every single day. He had dinner with his mother once a week. He made Saturday pancakes. He helped with homework. He lived the balance he'd been trying to create, proving daily that you could be both a dedicated professional and a present parent. On New Year's Eve morning, exactly 1 year after Victoria had knocked on his door at midnight, Daniel received an unexpected call from Robert. "I'm retiring," Robert said without preamble. "What? Robert, why?" "Because I'm 62 years old, and I've spent the last 40 years measuring success in purely financial terms. Watching you and Victoria this year showed me what I've been missing, what I sacrificed for spreadsheets and profit margins." His voice was quieter than Daniel had ever heard it. "I have 3 children I barely know because I was always working. I have a wife who built her own life separate from mine because I was never present. I have money and success and absolutely no meaningful relationships." Daniel sat down, shocked by the raw vulnerability in Robert's voice. "I don't want to spend my last good years making the same mistakes," Robert continued. "I want to know my grandchildren. I want to repair things with my wife while there's still time. I want to figure out who I am beyond my job title and bank account." "I'm sorry, Robert. I didn't know things were that difficult." "How could you? I spent decades making sure nobody knew, making sure everyone saw only the successful CFO, never the lonely man underneath." Robert cleared his throat. "Anyway, I'm calling to say thank you for showing me that there's a different way to measure success, that relationships matter more than revenues, that being present matters more than being productive." "What will you do?" "I don't know yet. That's the terrifying and exciting part. Maybe I'll teach. Maybe I'll volunteer. Maybe I'll just spend time with my family and figure it out as I go." He paused. "You're going to make a good CFO." "Wait, what?" "Victoria's offering you my position. She'll call this afternoon to make it official. I recommended you specifically." Daniel's mind reeled. "Robert, I'm not qualified to be CFO. I don't have the financial background." "You have something more important. You understand that numbers represent people, that financial decisions have human consequences, that sustainable success requires treating employees as assets to develop, not costs to minimize." Robert's voice was firm. "The technical financial skills can be learned. The wisdom to use those skills responsibly, that's rare. You have it. Use it well." They talked for a few more minutes, then said goodbye. Daniel sat holding his phone, processing what had just happened. CFO, Chief Financial Officer, a position that would mean more responsibility, more pressure, more complexity. It would also mean more ability to influence company direction, more power to protect the programs they'd built, more opportunity to prove that humanity and profitability could coexist at every level of corporate decision-making. Victoria's call came at 2 o'clock, exactly as Robert had predicted. "I assume Robert already told you," she said. "He did." "Victoria, I'm honored, but I'm not sure I'm qualified. I'm not interested in traditional qualifications. I'm interested in values, vision, and the courage to make difficult choices. You have all 3. Her voice was warm but firm. "I'm asking you to be CFO because I trust you to make financial decisions that account for human impact. Because I know you'll fight to protect our programs even when it's financially uncomfortable. Because you understand that the best investment we can make is in our people." "What about Emma? The time commitments?" "We'll structure it the same way we structured your current position. Flexible hours. Remote work when possible. 3:15 pickups non-negotiable." "Daniel, I'm not asking you to sacrifice your daughter for this job. I'm asking you to bring your whole self, including your role as a father, to the work we're doing." Daniel looked at Emma's poster from school, still propped against the living room wall. My dad helps people learn new things so they can have better jobs and take care of their families. Can I give you my answer tomorrow? He asked. Of course, but Daniel, I already know what you're going to say, because you're going to choose what matters, just like you always do. That evening, Daniel told Emma about the job offer over dinner. Would you still pick me up at 3:15? She asked immediately. Every single day. That would never change. Then you should do it. You're really good at helping people, Daddy. You should help as many people as you can. Even if it means I'm sometimes stressed or tired? Emma considered this seriously. Everybody gets stressed and tired sometimes. What matters is that you still show up. You still keep your promises. You still make time for penguin pancakes and bedtime stories. She smiled. And you do all that stuff. So yeah, I think you should do it. Daniel pulled her into a hug, marveling at the wisdom of this 8-year-old who somehow understood what took most adults decades to learn. At 11:30 on New Year's Eve, after Emma was asleep and his mother had gone home from their small celebration, Daniel sat in his living room watching the same city skyline he'd watched exactly 1 year ago. The apartment was the same, the view was the same, but everything else had changed. At 11:55, his phone rang. I'm outside, Victoria said. Can I come up? Daniel opened the door to find her standing there in jeans and a sweater instead of her usual business attire. She looked younger, more relaxed, more like the person she'd been at her most vulnerable rather than her most polished. I wanted to be here at midnight, she said, to mark the anniversary properly. Is that weird? Not even a little. Come in. They stood at the window together as the countdown began. Outside, the city prepared to celebrate. Inside this small apartment, two people who'd helped each other find courage stood in comfortable silence. A year ago, I was terrified, Victoria said as the countdown reached 30 seconds. I was about to approve something I knew was wrong because I'd convinced myself I didn't have any other choice. And now? Now I know that you always have a choice, that courage is choosing what's right, even when it costs you everything. That integrity matters more than efficiency. That treating people well isn't just moral, it's strategic. The countdown reached 10, 9, 8. Thank you, Victoria continued, for telling me the truth when I needed it most, for taking a job that seemed impossible, for fighting beside me when everyone said we were wrong, for proving that businesses can be both profitable and humane. 3, 2, 1. Fireworks exploded over the city, brilliant and beautiful and full of promise. Happy New Year, Daniel said. Happy New Year, to both of us, to everything we've built and everything we're going to build. They watched the fireworks together, two people who'd started in completely different places but had found common ground in the belief that people mattered more than profits, that integrity was stronger than efficiency, that courage could change not just individual lives, but entire organizations. I'm accepting the CFO position, Daniel said. Victoria smiled. I knew you would. How? Because you're going to choose what matters, and this matters. Not because of the title or the prestige, but because it gives you more power to protect what we've built, to expand it, to prove it works at every level. I'm scared I'll fail, that I'll let you down, that I'll let down all the people who believe in what we're doing. Then you'll be scared while you succeed, just like I was, just like we all are when we're doing something that actually matters. Victoria turned from the window to face him. A year ago, I asked you how you found the courage to choose your daughter over your career. Do you remember what you said? That it was the easiest decision I ever made because I knew what mattered most. And that's why you're going to be an exceptional CFO, because you know what matters. Because you measure success in changed lives, not just change balance sheets, because you understand that the numbers represent people, and people are what make everything else possible. They talked for another hour, planning the year ahead, discussing the programs they wanted to expand, dreaming about the company they could build together. Not just a profitable business, but a model for how organizations could treat employees with dignity while achieving financial success. Proof that humanity and profitability weren't just compatible, they were complementary. At 1:30, Victoria prepared to leave. Same time next year? She asked with a slight smile. I'll be here. Though hopefully you won't need to show up at midnight seeking advice about layoffs. No, next year I'm showing up at midnight to celebrate everything we've accomplished, to toast the fact that we chose the harder path and proved it was the right one. After she left, Daniel checked on Emma one last time. She was sleeping peacefully, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin, completely secure in the knowledge that her father would be there in the morning. He returned to the window and looked out at the city, at the millions of lives being lived, the millions of choices being made, the millions of moments that determined whether people flourished or struggled. Somewhere in that city, employees were sleeping easier because they had jobs they'd almost lost, because they had training opportunities they'd never imagined, because they worked for a company that valued them as human beings, not just productive resources. Marcus's daughter was at Northwestern, studying to become an engineer. Sarah had been promoted again, managing projects she'd never dreamed she could handle. Diego was finishing his associate's degree, paid for by Arcadia's expanded education benefits. Dozens, hundreds, eventually thousands of lives touched by the choice Victoria had made on New Year's Eve a year ago. The choice Daniel had helped her find the courage to make. This was what success looked like. Not stock prices, though those mattered. Not profit margins, though those were important. But human flourishing, dignity restored, potential unlocked, lives changed because someone chose to invest in people instead of abandoning them. Daniel pulled out his phone and looked at the photo Victoria had sent months ago, the young woman who'd started her company with nothing but optimism and $5,000 in credit card debt. That woman had wanted to build something meaningful. She'd wanted to prove that business could be a force for good. 20 years later, she'd finally done it. Not alone. Not without cost, not without fear and doubt and battles that sometimes seemed unwinnable. But she'd done it. They'd done it, together. And tomorrow, or rather, today, since it was now past 2 in the morning, they would keep doing it. Keep fighting for programs that helped people. Keep proving that integrity mattered. Keep choosing courage over convenience, humanity over efficiency, people over profit. Because that's what leaders did when they actually cared about the people they led. Because that's what fathers did when they wanted to model integrity for their daughters. Because that's what human beings did when they had the courage to live according to their values, instead of defaulting to what was easy or expected or financially optimal. Daniel Brooks, former maintenance worker, current director of employee development, future chief financial officer, stood at his window and welcomed the new year with gratitude and hope and absolute certainty that the hardest choices were always the ones most worth making. Outside, the last fireworks faded into darkness. Inside, in a small apartment filled with evidence of a life well lived, Emma's drawings, family photos, the poster about helping people have better jobs. Daniel smiled. The midnight knock had changed everything, not because it brought scandal or crisis or complication, but because it brought the gift every person needs but rarely receives, someone brave enough to tell them the truth, someone willing to challenge them to be better, someone who believes that integrity isn't weakness but the foundation of everything that matters. Victoria had given him that gift by trusting him with her vulnerability. He'd given it back by having the courage to be honest. And together, they'd built something that proved one essential truth, that when people choose courage over comfort, integrity over expediency, humanity over efficiency, they don't just change their own lives, they change the world. One honest conversation at a time, one brave choice at a time, one life at a time, until the change becomes a movement, until the movement becomes a new way of doing business, until the impossible becomes inevitable. Daniel checked the time. 2:15 in the morning. In 12 hours, he'd need to pick Emma up from his mother's house. In between, he'd sleep a few hours, make penguin pancakes for breakfast, and spend the afternoon playing in the park. Because work mattered. But Emma mattered more. And knowing the difference between the two, knowing which to choose when they conflicted, that was the wisdom that made everything else possible. Happy New Year, indeed. To courage, to integrity, to the belief that people are always worth investing in, to second chances and new beginnings, and the extraordinary things that happen when someone knocks on your door at midnight and you have the bravery to tell them the truth, to everything that was built and everything yet to be built, to the future that started with one honest conversation and would continue with thousands more. Daniel turned off the lights and went to bed, already looking forward to tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that, confident that whatever challenges came, he would face them the same way he'd faced everything this year, with honesty, with courage, with the certainty that doing what's right matters more than doing what's easy, and with Emma's hand in his, reminding him every single day that the best measure of success is love, presence, and promises kept. The story that began with a knock at midnight ended with a father sleeping peacefully, knowing he'd chosen well, knowing he'd helped others choose well too, knowing that integrity, once found, changes everything, forever.